will spread in from the west through this morning. A band of rain will clear away to the northeast of Northern Ireland this morning, though some showers will linger behind. A windy morning too, especially around coasts at first. A band of rain will continue to spread eastward this afternoon, remaining windy and a risk of coastal gales. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And you're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you today, the strike is over, but we're still off the rails, it seems. When will it get easier just to get from A to B? Top chef Aldo Zilli with us, with all the leftovers, with a mouth-watering treat in store for us this lunchtime. But first, let's update you on all of today's news headlines. And at least 60 people are now believed to have died after what's being described as the once-in-a-lifetime winter storm, which continues to hammer the United States and Canada. The latest from the weather people there saying another 9 inches of snow in New York State today. Well, the freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions have left many areas under more than 4 feet of snow so far. Indeed, the city of Buffalo, New York State, the hardest hit. Emergency services recovering 27 bodies there so far, many having frozen to death in their cars. President Joe Biden has issued a federal emergency declaration for the whole of the state, authorising government assistance for local recovery efforts in New York. Here, a 23-year-old man has died after being stabbed in a nightclub in Birmingham on Boxing Day. West Midlands police say they were called to the incident just before midnight. They say hundreds of people were at the nightclub at the time and have now urged any witnesses to come forward. While Merseyside police are continuing to question 2 people in connection with the fatal shooting of 26-year-old woman on Christmas Eve. Elle Edwards was shot at the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey Village while celebrating Christmas with family and friends. She was taken to hospital for emergency treatment but died later. A 30-year-old man has now been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, while a 19-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. The Levelling Up Secretary says that opposition to new housing developments could be reduced by focusing on better design. Michael Gove says that too many planning applications are indifferent or insipid and is now suggesting that the potential of some public spaces is not being utilised. He's supporting a call by the think tank Policy Exchange for a new National School of Urban Design and Architecture. Teachers' unions are condemning the Scottish Government's decision to delay the rollout of free school meals for all primary school pupils. The union is arguing that a cost of living crisis, the food programme is vital to tackle child poverty. The introduction of free school meals for all primary school pupils was due in August 2022. The Scottish Government's defended the delay by saying Scotland has the most generous universal provision of free school lunches in the UK. In the UK, a yellow weather warning in place for snow and ice for the north and east of Scotland today. The Met Office saying the freezing conditions could last until 10 o'clock tonight. They say travel disruption is possible because the wintry showers are creating patchy ice, mainly on higher routes. Traffic Scotland says its gritters are out at the moment, but that motorists should still plan ahead. So what have we got for you on GB News Live today? Well, the latest round of strikes by the RMT union came to an end at 6 this morning, but many rail services are only just resuming now at 12 noon to returning to what is effectively a weekend timetable. And another union, the TSSA, has also started industrial action affecting cross-country and GWR services for the next 48 hours. So, Network Rail says that 70% of services will be operating today, but is still urging passengers to check their travel times. And then, of course, more national strikes by the RMT beginning in a week, with 48-hour stoppages for the 3rd to 4th and then the 6th to 7th of January, and train drivers with ASLEF walking out on January the 5th. Well, joining us to discuss the situation, again, travel journalist and author Christian Woolmar, who quite sensibly is staying at home and not trying to get anywhere by rail at the moment, because, Christian, we were discussing this seems to be the perfect storm of engineering works and industrial action by all the rail unions, and still no sort of developments with the government in solving this, it seems, into the new year.
Yes, this is déjà vu all over again, isn't it? We've been here before, Mark. Can I see any signs of progress? Well, somebody in ASLEF told me that they are meeting on January the 9th. ASLEF, of course, is not the union that is mostly involved in these disputes. It is, as your pictures are showing, the RMT. But nevertheless, that is a sign that at least some talk is going on. But then this guy said, well, the rail minister, Hugh Merriman, has allocated half an hour for this meeting. And you think, well, half an hour, that's not really going to solve the problem. Now, the RMT, on the other hand, I must say, are, I think, suffering somewhat from the number of strikes that they've called, from the loss of wages that has resulted from that. And they've got 4 days, as you said, planned for the first week of the new year. I am beginning to wonder whether they can actually sustain that, and whether it might not be quite as bad, whether more of them are going to go through the picket lines, that sort of thing. Seems to me that, they might have overreached themselves, but on the other hand, I did think that earlier, and so far the strikes have held good.
And do you think that what the government is trying to adopt this war of attrition in the hope that at some stage they will break? Because it does seem to be one of those existential questions. It's not just about pay, it's about the way that the railway is structured and pushing through, as the government might see, these reforms on staffing and manning.
Yes, I mean, I think there is a war of attrition going on, but all the signs is that tactic isn't working, is it? Because it's not only the rail workers; it's all sorts of other people, from the border force people to nurses and whoever, firemen and so on. So I think there's still a lot of public sympathy. It is surprising when you see the vox pops around these rail strikes, just how much support there still is. So I think the idea the government's just going to kind of fold its arms and sit this out, I think is misplaced. And I think it will cost it even further support. I mean, after all, the Conservatives are not exactly doing well in the polls. And I think that people are blaming them rather than the Labour Party.
Yeah, I think obviously that the Labour lead is holding firm, some 26 points ahead. But in terms of the question for the rail network, I mean, is this a time now where there is a reassessment on the performance of the privatised firms and what happens from now on, particularly, of course, when all those people are going to be faced with rises of at least 5.9%, 6% effectively in the spring, just for their season tickets and off-peak travel?
Yes, I mean, there is this ongoing situation where the railways are supposed to be being restructured, but what the government has made a mistake in doing is saying, well, we're not going to give any pay rises until we get this restructuring through and we get increased productivity. But as I pointed out to an MP I was having a debate with on another TV programme, which was that the MPs have had an 8% rise without any increase in productivity. And what they should do is separate out the two. They should separate out the productivity, which, there certainly is some money that could be saved, but it's unclear really how much, from the actual pay deal. These people deserve a pay rise, and I think the public recognises that. They haven't had one for most of the 3 years. The train drivers are paid very well, but the rest of the staff are not paid particularly well. 25, 30 grand a year is pretty average wage in the rail industry, and that's certainly not a king's ransom.
No.
So they should sort that out and then talk about productivity.
And you've begged the question, how do you measure an MP's productivity? But that's a different matter. But thank you very much for joining us. And let's wish you and all other train travellers a happy new year, possibly. Anyway, thank you very much, Ian, Christian, for joining us. Well, joining us now in the studio is political commentator Andy Williams, who's going to be with us today. Andy, welcome. I don't know if you wouldn't have come by train, because no one's going anywhere by train this morning anyway.
Well, actually, I would have come by train, but I wasn't able to. So clearly, this is affecting lots of people up and down the country.
Yeah, I mean, are people now wondering, look, is it time even to dare, we mentioned, renationalise our rail network? Is it time to acknowledge that the privatisation hasn't worked in terms of the fares we're having to pay and the disruption and cancellation to services, TransPennine, Avanti, Thameslink? I mean, the figures are just ridiculous.
Yeah, so I mean, my understanding is that renationalisation is a very expensive option. It would take a lot of time, and that actually there are more effective ways to professionalise and change our railway network. But clearly, the status quo is not tenable. I do think, and I agree with a lot of what Christian said, actually, I think that the government has quite misjudged the public mood here. The public seems to be broadly on the side of the railway workers and the fact that they haven't had...
Even Mick Grinch, as he's been named by the newspapers?
Well, I think what a lot of people see is that, that people might not be wholly behind Mick Lynch.
I know, it's very easy to do, isn't it? But yeah.
They may not wholly be behind him, but he is a very effective communicator. He is doing his job and standing by his members. And I think where we will probably land is that there needs to be some ground given to the workers, but there also needs to be a complete change to the way the railways work in this country, and there needs to be wholesale
But is that actually the problem that we're facing? It's not technically about the pay deal, maybe. It's about the way the railways are going to be run. And Mick Lynch, of course, has made the point that they do not want to go any further down the line, if you pardon the pun, to driver-only trains. They see it as a safety issue, that you need someone else because, in many train crashes, it's the driver's cab that gets hit first.
Yeah, well, I think the pay deal is only one dimension. That's absolutely right. I mean, on driverless trains, I must admit, I'm not completely familiar with the ins and outs of that issue, but I know there are concerns around safety. And also the fact that, do we really want to be moving towards a completely automated future? There is something about having real people driving these trains and being employed. So
or even going to a ticket counter and trying to get a ticket from someone who is a human being, rather than trying to press buttons and you get lost in the machine.
Yeah, no, it's a complicated issue, but if you look at things like the level of cancellations, delays, those sorts of aspects, it's clearly not working properly, and I think there needs to be a mechanism. I think this has already happened with a couple of lines. The government needs to be more prepared to step in and take control of and improve those services that aren't running effectively.
So I think they did it with LNER, didn't they? The East Coast Main Line. So that's an interesting point. Well, maybe we'll discuss that later because you're with us for this afternoon.
Yep.
Plenty of other issues to come up. Andy, for the moment, thank you for that. But let's update you on all the other issues of the day now with, of course, 90 people reportedly crossing the Channel on Christmas Day to bring the total number so far this year to 45,756. We haven't got the numbers for yesterday as yet, but we'll update you when they come in. It's actually a 60% increase over 2021. More than 50 Tory MPs have been seeking to change those modern slavery laws to ease the crisis in the Channel. But for former Prime Minister Theresa May warning that the government tightening such laws could actually make it easier for the criminal gangs to control the victims. It follows an announcement to that deal with Albania to help clear the UK's asylum backlog with border staff in Tirana. Well, reports in the Times newspaper today suggesting the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is planning to make it even harder for foreign students now to bring their spouses into the UK. What are the legal implications of all this? Joining us is immigration lawyer Skylar McKeith. Skylar, thanks for joining us. All this on top, of course, that decision by the High Court to say that the Rwanda policy is technically legal, even though the government's got to identify the individuals concerned. I mean, it's still a bit of a mishmash, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. I mean, so first of all, it's dangerous to cross the Channel, and people have died, people have gone missing, and there is also the risk of human trafficking. And so the Prime Minister's plan is to tackle this illegal migration. He promised to tackle this issue, and he said that legislation would be introduced early next year to tackle this problem. Now, he has also admitted that the UK is currently spending £5.5 million a day on hotels to house asylum seekers, and this is obviously not sustainable. And so the intention is to instead move asylum seekers to other locations, such as disused holiday parks, former student halls, and military sites that are not being used. But really, the focus needs to be on tackling this illegal migration rather than legal migration, because at the moment they're looking at everything. The government is trying to put restrictions on all migration, from legal to illegal migration, and this doesn't work either. So, for example, the Home Secretary announced that they are going to increase the minimum salary threshold for family visas. So this means that the minimum salary threshold for British citizens to be able to bring their spouses to the UK on the family visa will be increased. And so currently, couples must prove they have a combined income of a certain amount. It's currently $18,600 per year.
So is the danger then? I will just break. We're getting a bit of break up on the signal, but we'll stay with it. That this is what a scattergun approach. So they're not focusing enough on particular areas and then solving that before moving on to the next problem.
Exactly. The issue is that they are looking to restrict everything across the board, basically, and this doesn't work. We have a labor shortage at the moment. We need individuals to fill certain jobs. These jobs are not being filled. They're making it harder for people to move to the UK legally. This doesn't work. The Prime Minister announced an intention to reduce UK migration amongst international students. They're thinking of implementing restrictions on these students to curb migration by making certain university courses ineligible for visas. And the plan would be to crack down on students enrolled to study so-called low-quality degrees, but the government will still fund British students through taxpayer student financing to study these so-called low-quality degrees. And it has been said that students who stay in the UK after completing their studies fill UK skills gaps, and we need these foreign students. The UK, as I said, has a labour shortage. We need educated individuals to enter the UK labour market. We need people who want to work and who want to contribute to society. There's also Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of what we heard from Suella Braverman, it does appear that she is aware of the political sensitivities of all this, and some may say, her critics, playing to the gallery on the whole immigration issue.
She seems to be. I mean, the focus needs to be on restricting illegal migration, focusing on that. That will reduce the immigration problem that they are encountering at the moment. Then maybe look at the legal migration restrictions, but the focus needs to be on illegal migration.
Skylar, thank you for that. It may well be that someone's trying to challenge you on that particular argument on your computer by the sound of it, but thank you for your time here on GB News. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll, of course, focus on that issue a little later in the programme. But let's move on to what's been happening in the States now. That at least 60 people now believed to have died in the worst Arctic blizzard in 45 years to hit both the US and Canada. Well, the rescue and recovery operation still ongoing. Teams out searching for those missing. The latest we're getting, there is another 9 inches of snow expected in parts of New York State today, hampering all those efforts. Well, some weather forecasters here predicting that Britain could see its snowiest January in 12 years, but the Met Office actually scotching such reports. But a Met Office yellow weather warning is in place for the north and east of Scotland until about 10 o'clock this evening, with ice a particular problem. Well, let's get the thoughts once more of British Weather Service's senior meteorologist Jim Dale. Johnny us. Jim, thanks for your time again. We were talking about this situation in the States, and we were discussing maybe that things would be over fairly soon and it would clear. But I'm just getting this news that they're saying that they've got another 9 inches of snow today, when all those rescue teams are out trying to check cars and snowdrifts and so on.
Yeah, we're on the transition zone, and in any transition zone, you're going to get these afterburners that in terms of that state, the New York state, it showers essentially. I'm not sure where the 9 inches came from. Always difficult to measure these things, but nonetheless, yes, it's still winter in that northeast area, in the northern areas. But the big story is going to be in these next few days. So today's Tuesday, between now or tomorrow and Friday. Huge change coming out of Mexico through Texas. All of this snow that you can see on the ground, or at least the majority of it, will start to melt readily as fast as it came in. It's going to go out in exactly the same way, only in reverse. So a big heat is coming, and that's going to cause us another problem, which is going to be flooding.
OK, so that's the reverse of what we were talking about, this weather bomb, where the pressure dropped so quickly, which built up those winds and whipped that snow up. It's the reverse of that, where it heats up very quickly then.
Yeah, it's the same thing. This is a huge continent, and you usually get your worst weathers, if you like, your most extreme weathers, and the change in that extreme from one to the other, the topsy-turvy, when you're in a large continent like the United States and Canada. So this is very warm air feeding out of Mexico through Texas. And then through most of the rest of the country. At the same time, we've got rain coming in to the west coast, so Oregon, Washington, Northern California, in for some localized, if not regionalized, flooding at the same time. The two together basically just going to see. I mean, I talked about temperatures in Miami on Christmas Day being 10 degrees. By the time we get to Friday, that's going to be 28 degrees. That's the sort of difference that you're going to see. So manifest changes.
Crazy, isn't it? Well, look, let's have a look at what's happening here, because we've got this yellow weather warning for Scotland until about 10 tonight for ice, and a lot of people saying, snowy weather in Scotland in winter shock. But clearly, a lot of people are concerned about what may be round the corner for January. You were saying that it's unlikely this weather system we saw in the States will be coming across the Atlantic. But how is it looking for us now into the new year?
Okay, I'm agreeing with the Met Office here. I mean, on the way to New Year, I think Scotland's got like today, and it's much of Scotland today, especially the Highlands and Grampian areas, inundated with snow. So they're getting their late white Christmas. As for the rest of us, it's basically a rain story, I think, and a bit of wind involved as well. Yeah, that snow might come down just ahead of New Year into some northern England areas and also Northern Ireland. So we'll have to watch that one. But generally speaking, I think you're right in terms of saying, is this the standard? Is it usual? Yeah, snow in Scotland. I think it is, more or less. It's nothing out of the ordinary that we see this kind of weather event between Christmas and New Year, that the north get a little bit more of the snow than the south. And I think that's the story. Unfolding into January, this is where I do agree with the Met Office. I can't see anything at this moment in time that suggests us reverting back to the troll from the Trondheim or anything coming out of America. I think we're safe with that. I think it's the tram lines, the conveyor belt off the Atlantic that's going to bring us the wet and the windy weather and looking out for storms. I think that's the recipe for us for the next few weeks.
Just a bit of grey gloom ahead, as ever. Jim, thank you very much indeed for your time and your expertise. Thank you very much indeed. And of course, we'll update you with what's happening in the States with that continuing rescue operation. Well, 3 prime ministers, 4 chancellors, all in the space of 4 months. What does the future hold for politics in this new year, especially for that man? We'll be discussing that next.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, the past 12 months have been a political roller coaster, to say the least. Some may even suggest a helter-skelter from Partygate to Beergate, and those within UK politics haven't shied away from scandals too. 4 chancellors, remember, 3 prime ministers, all within the space of 4 months. Not exactly exuding stability needed to win a general election. Well, also the cost of living crisis added in, then the migrant crisis hitting. So can the Tories regain political momentum? What is in store for them, indeed, for this next political year? Joining us in the studio to discuss that further, political commentator Reem Ibrahim. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We were just having a chat, actually, in the break about the sort of existential crisis within the Tory party. For many people like you, who and you're quite happy to declare yourself as a free marketeer,
Yes.
even a Trust supporter.
Yes.
Do you feel, let down? Do you feel that the Tory party has just lost its way?
I think that this year we've seen the Conservative Party sort of push forward with this identity crisis that has essentially ruined conservatism for the country, I think, for the near future. I mean, the failure of Liz Truss and Kamikaze has sort of meant that actually I think is sort of the biggest political failure of my lifetime. This sort of was the one chance that we had to convince the country that free markets work, to convince the country that the state has the propensity to do more harm than good, and her failure and Kwazi's failure essentially, put down to hubris, put down to arrogance, has meant that this has sort of failed.
So is this man, who many have described as the boring chief executive, Mr Sunak in charge of the company, is he the man just to hold the fort while your political fortunes recover, or is it just the death throes of a political movement that's lost its way and is tired after 12 years?
I think the party is tired after 12 years, but, what does Sunak stand for? I think he sort of comes from maybe the sort of the left of the party, the sort of idea around, higher taxes to sort of spend our way. He's a high tax, high spend Conservative, if those two words can go together. But I think that this sort of idea around the tax burden at the moment, we saw from the Chancellor's budget this year, Hunt's statement this year, we've seen the highest taxes on record. There is nothing Conservative about this government. The government are essentially now crushing smaller businesses and crushing hard-working, ambitious young people, essentially driving us out of the country.
What about the question then of competence? Because clearly we are in a period of riven industrial relations in terms of rail, the health service, and again, people pointing to 10 years of underinvestment, for instance. Is there a recognition that there aren't really the answers there at the moment to solve any of these problems, and we get to, again, what we were discussing, fed up Britain, that people will press the button for anyone but the Tories?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the sort of tale around the incumbent government will always sort of be voted out if that is the issue. I think when it comes to the RMT strikes and the National Rail strikes, a lot of these, and sort of the postal workers, NHS workers, a lot of these strikes are coming from areas of the public sector or recently privatised sectors. What this tells me, sort of as a free marketeer, what this shows is that the public sector are just not there sort of able to catch up with wages. When we're thinking about the postal service, they were not able to catch up until they were privatised, and that's where we sort of see these strikes happening. We sort of saw the summer of discontent, and it's just this entire year of sort of negativity in politics.
Yeah, and that has political consequences eventually, of course. But the other issue is that Sunak particularly has got this mantra that we cannot give any public sector pay increase because it leads or reads into inflation. There are many economists saying, no, that's not the right way to read it. It's private sector issues that actually lead into the inflationary spiral. So has he got that wrong too?
I think he's got that wrong in terms of sort of NHS workers. I mean, nurses certainly deserve a pay rise, but again, I think that this is a sort of wider issue. We spend so much money on the NHS. I think just below £200 billion a year goes towards the Department of Health and Social Care. But where does the money go? I think this is the NHS as an example is a sort of a bureaucratic black hole.
And I think, was it the head of inclusion West Midlands NHS Trust was looking for?
Yeah, they earn about £80,000 a year, but NHS staff, the sort of frontline workers that we sort of seem to bang on about over the lockdowns, sort of they aren't being paid enough. But again, I think that if we sort of reform the NHS, maybe sort of include private sector involvement, NHS workers will earn more.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, what is the way back? How do they actually solve this and recoup? I think the Ipsos poll had Labour 26 points ahead.
Yeah, and I think the sort of the difference between Sunak and Starmer personally from the Ipsos poll show that actually there isn't a huge amount of difference. I mean, 49%, 42% is not a huge difference. What we do see, however, is that overall the government sort of seem to be very negative favour with the public. I think that poll is quite it sort of shows the way that the people sort of generally feel pretty negative towards the government as a whole, rather than as Sunak and Starmer personally.
Yeah. OK, well, we've been seeing in terms of Prime Minister's questions with the attack lines from Keir Starmer, an accomplished lawyer, and he's been quite forensic in sort of cross-examination, but going very much with the class issues. and that's going back to the old days, if you like, of trying to get clear blue water between the two parties. Has that worked, do you think?
I don't think it has. I think that Starmer has been sort of playing it pretty safe this year overall. I think it's sort of looking at the next election, it really is Starmer's to lose. I think we know that Labour is going to probably win the next election. If it's a minority government or sort of a coalition or supply and command sort of situation going on, we know that the Tories, sort of have it's a very negative favour in the next election. But Starmer this year has sort of played it very safe. And I think that we sort of did have maybe an alternative universe where we had Starmer actually arguing that the tax burden was too high, and the Conservatives, successively increasing taxes.
The world turned upside down.
It really was. And for somebody like me that believes in free markets, it was bizarre to see Starmer arguing for lower taxation and seeing the Conservatives increase it.
OK, well, here's the question. So is he and a resurgent Labour actually the thing that Sunak should worry about? Or is it actually that the Tory party fracturing, that there is, a populist there called Nigel Farage out in the political margins, a GB News presenter, we should add, and lots of people are saying, actually, that's where the Tories may lose more political ground, is with people leaving the party and going to those margins?
I think it's the latter rather than the former. I think that people like Nigel Farage because he's, first of all, an excellent communicator, and secondly, he represents people in the party that actually are Conservative. And that's why I'm just sort of thinking about young Conservatives. We sort of see...
What are we? What do we stand for?
The party doesn't stand for anything. We've had 5 different prime ministers over the course of the last 12 years, all of whom have had different visions for the country. Some of whom are Remainers, some of whom are Brexiteers, and a lot of them actually had no vision for the country. Now, I will sort of say I think that Liz Truss did have that vision, but she executed it terribly.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was the right one, but it was executed terribly. And it meant that actually this sort of idea behind free markets, this idea that the government does, more bad things than good, this idea that the tax burden is too high, that the government is crushing small businesses, crushing hard-working people.
Yeah, but the critics, of course, saying, well, that's all well and good, but she failed to actually complete the virtuous circle as Thatcher did by getting your own house in order before you go down that road.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think that when we're thinking about the mini-budget, for example, people talk about the mini-budget as this bombshell. It really was not that radical. It was essentially a reversal of the increases in taxes that we saw in April. So I don't think that it was that radical, but it was the fact that it was going to be funded through borrowing and it was not going to be funded through cuts in spending. And we sort of saw, again, sort of thinking about Prime Minister's questions, Liz Truss unequivocally promised not to cut spending, and that's really where the problem lies. We've got a huge, disastrous sort of mismanagement of public spending, and our taxpayer money, we're sort of spending extortionate amounts that is going to the government, and it's being mismanaged terribly.
Right, last question. Who are you going to vote for the next general election, given all this?
I probably will still be voting Conservative, reluctantly. I think that we need to sort of have this internal conversation within the party. But unfortunately, I don't think that any Labour government will be for me.
Even if they indicate, for instance, they're going for tax-cutting measures and get the economy moving in the way you want it?
Well, look, if Keir Starmer comes up on Wednesday at Prime Minister's Questions and unequivocally promises to cut spending, abolish the NHS and cut taxes, I would probably be voting for him. But I don't see that happening in the near future.
And I don't think there may be, at the moment, many with you on abolishing the NHS, but there we are. Thank you very much indeed for your look ahead to 2021, and we'll see whether there is going to be a roller coaster or a merry-go-round or whatever fairground ride you prefer. Thank you very much indeed. You've been sending us your views on the issues of the day. Nick, first of all, the armed forces have shown how inefficient and overpaid our strikers are. Border Force workers are a prime example of this. Yes, this is the issue where I think many of the queues at our various airports have actually been pretty smooth going through with the armed forces in charge of passport checks. Graham, privatisation hasn't worked due to overseas investment. The investment should have been more UK-centric. Human work is basically becoming outdated and obsolete. I think that may be referring to the fact that many of the rail companies, of course, are owned by other European companies, French and Spanish and so on. Patricia, May needs to stop interfering. I think this is Theresa May. She failed in all of her jobs. Let others who can succeed get on with it. Carry on bringing us your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk, and perhaps looking ahead to what this next year will bring us on all the issues of the day. Just to update you on what's happening in the GB News kitchen, as a lot of you get fed up with the leftover turkey sandwiches, because star chef Aldo Zilli with us, joining us in the studio to share all those post-Christmas recipe ideas coming up in a moment. It's a tasty treat for you.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No, it's called Betwixtmas. I'm sure that's not a word. Anyway, it's the awkward period between Christmas and New Year. A few days with the festive leftovers and any remaining treats. And a time when, yes, turkey and ham sandwiches start to get a bit boring, even with a piccalilli, if you've got any of that left. But fear not, joining us now in the studio to inspire you all with his post-Christmas ideas is star chef and restaurateur Aldo Zilli. Aldo, very warm welcome to you. And I've forgotten how you say Merry Christmas in Italian.
Buon Natale.
Buon Natale.
Buon Natale.
Buon Natale.
Not buon, not buen.
Buen.
Buono.
Buono, buono, buono.
Bravo, Marco.
And
allora,
you brought some really excellent treats that you've been using the GB News kitchen to prepare.
I have. You got the best facilities.
Really? you must show me where they are.
When can I build my own kitchen? I keep coming here and I have to cook in my house, and then it gets here and it's a bit cold.
But the secret to this is you've used everything that's in the fridge, so you haven't brought in extra new stuff. It's literally the leftovers.
100%. I mean, Casa Zilli kitchen this year was full of people.
Right.
And I've got a daughter that's 38, and she loves mac and cheese. She's been pestering me the whole weekend to get this cheese and put it in a bowl and do a mac and cheese. So I said, no, I need to do it for GB News. And there it is.
And there it is.
All the cheeses in the fridge are in there.
And this is a mix of what, strong and mild cheese?
Strong and mild. It's got Boursin. It's got the Emmental.
Right.
It's got cheddar. It's got, you name it, it's in there. Parmigiano, Reggiano.
And luckily, I'm not going to have to eat all this myself.
No, I'm going to give you a little bit, though. You have to try it.
The floor manager's been very busy and he's even given us... we're not eating with our fingers, so there we are.
You got knife and forks here.
What's the secret to actually ensuring this doesn't get too stodgy?
Okay.
That's always the case with the old
mac and cheese. I mean, mac and cheese is not totally my favourite food, but when you got a lot of cheeses in the fridge, it does become very, very interesting. Okay, so we make a white sauce.
Right.
We make the roux with butter and flour. Make sure you cook that flour.
Yeah.
A lot of people would put the flour in with the butter and then just puts everything in. No, you have to cook off that flour. And then milk, and you loosen it up, and then you start adding your grated cheeses. I mean, cheddar, Gruyere. There's all sorts of different cheeses in here because I had different cheeses in the fridge. There's even blue cheese in there.
I was going to say I could pick up a little piquancy there.
There's a little blue cheese that I got from Sardinia in there. It's really, really good. Yeah. I mean, these are not just ordinary cheeses.
No.
It's Casa Zilli cheeses.
Right.
So they would be a bit special, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Well, and you know, I'm in Sussex at the moment, and there's some great Sussex cheeses, which obviously is wonderful for local food, which is an Italian tradition. You know, you buy everything locally if you can, and use the local ingredients.
So can I just say to you, I saw you earlier this morning. We came in together.
Yeah. And you were carrying bags and bags of stuff.
Yeah, and he said to me, don't you have a very glamorous assistant?
Yeah.
I said, no, I don't. And guess what? I also do all the washing up at home.
Well, I was going to ask, in Casa Zilli, is it not only chef having to do all the prep?
I'm telling a little lie there. I have got a very, very nice housekeeper that didn't go home this year. Normally she goes home.
Okay.
So this year I was very lucky that Camilla stayed with us and she had Christmas lunch with us. But the condition of having Christmas lunch with me was one of those conditions that she had to clear up. Anyway, what I was going to say to you is I had a very traditional Christmas lunch.
Yeah.
You, on the other hand, had my porchetta.
Yeah, I have got to admit that I didn't have turkey. I don't know, did you have the traditional turkey?
We did, traditional turkey, all the trimmings, yep.
With you know, the family around the table?
Yeah.
Right, OK. Well, this is confession time. We went out for Christmas lunch for the first time ever, and I had an Italian Christmas lunch, which is porchetta, which is rolled pork belly.
Yes.
That's the cut.
Yes.
With stuffing.
Sausage inside. And the fillet of the pork inside.
And I tell you what, I would recommend that. I know, you know, turkey is the tradition, but have a think about porchetta maybe.
Turkey was scarce this year, so it was a good option.
Yeah.
We did a barbecue as well.
You did? My son-in-law did the barbecue, the turkey, slow cooking, and obviously getting the wood chips just to give it a little bit of extra barbecue flavour.
Yeah, a bit of smoke.
Yeah.
A bit of smoke, yes. Well, the thing is,
we're pushing the boundaries here a bit, aren't we?
Well, every year... I mean, this year with the tradition for us, it came back, and I have a little grandson, so I did all the Father Christmas, the before and after, and I did all of that. The reindeer came, and just in case he's watching, and I got the carrots and the milk and everything, and they came and they left him a sack of presents, and it was very, very, very beautiful to have. But I also have Twiggy, which is my daughter. She's 14, coming up to 35. And I have my son, which is 16.
Yeah.
And he's a sportsman, so he doesn't really get involved in the cooking or anything like that.
Because this was the question I was going to ask you. As chef, do you like to be in control of the kitchen? Or do you, as many families do, muck in and make sure that, you know, Christmas lunch is an event where everyone does their own little bit and prepares the meal together?
I really don't like people mucking in. My mother-in-law insisted, Maureen insisted on peeling potatoes. And I said, OK, if you really must. You know, she got up early, and I caught her in the kitchen peeling these potatoes. I said, how long is that going to take you? I said, A, you're using the wrong peeler.
Oh.
And B, that's going to take you ages. So let me do them for you. She said, no. She's 8 years old. No. When she says that she has to do
isn't this part of the process that they feel as if they've contributed to the family meal?
Yes.
And, you know.
And everybody wants to, but I say to them, why don't you come and contribute when everything's done and you need to wash up?
Yeah. And did you do the washing up?
I helped with the washing up.
Right.
And actually, we had the same thing on our Christmas day. So my mum, who's an excellent cook, did the turkey, did everything. Yeah. But we mucked in with the chopping and the peeling, which I think people feel that...
They feel like they want to.
Of taking part in the day.
But Mark, before we go any further, I need to show you these crackers.
I'm going to say to the viewers...
Do you mind if we do it's a leftover cracker, because nobody wanted these crackers.
Who's going to win this?
God, my phone.
Don't pull that cracker, that's mine. That's Casa Zilli.
Oh, that's Casa Zilli calling.
Oh, I've won it.
Oh, you got it.
I've got something in there. You've got one to pull as well. Look,
I'll pull that with you. Let me see if I'm a bit more lucky with you. Oh, I got it here.
This is...
I never get them.
Just to update the viewers and listeners at home, this is mince pie gin, which is rather festive. Now, this actually in itself is interesting. We see more and more of these craft gins with all these different flavours. And this is something that you've done at the restaurant as well?
Yes. Casa Zilli now has got all these different flavoured gins. But also this year, I received a lot of different flavours panettone.
Thank you. Panettone gin?
You know, panettone, they've got ginger panettone now. They've got chocolate, different flavours panettone. I'm not sure about that. I think that panettone is a recipe that needs to be traditional and it needs to stay. Yeah. It's a bit like Christmas pudding.
A little bit of icing sugar on the top, you can get away with that.
Yeah, but I mean, when you start messing around too much with the recipe, talk about Christmas pudding. We forgot Christmas pudding this year, so my mother-in-law asked her son, and Robert, bless him, Christmas Eve, turned up and he had the Christmas pudding. But he ended up in here, in my trifle.
Oh.
Because we forgot.
Right.
So this is my trifle, right, for the viewers at home. This is a Christmas trifle. It's got a bit of everything from the fridge in it.
What's on the top?
That's a creme pâtissière, which obviously is made by me. It's got profiteroles. It's got rhubarb.
Wow.
It's got panettone.
Oh, my God.
Layers. It's got a layer of winter fruits.
Ooh.
Coulis.
Right.
In the middle. And then it's got at the bottom, right at the bottom, it's got my mother-in-law's Christmas pudding.
Oh, my God. So again, leftovers, but I mean...
But in a...
Yeah.
You know,
and again, trifle was one of those things that you could do that.
Look at this. It's underneath there. Look.
Right, I'm going to hold that up to camera 8. This is our special trifle cam. There we are. Look, it's just... So that's all the layers there. And this is the great thing, that you can make food fun.
Yes.
As well as being a bit sniffy about what the ingredients should be.
If you think about all the things that this would have probably ended up in the bin. Most of this.
Right, because it goes off.
Because it goes off very quickly, and you know, luckily I was invited to come to GB News.
Yeah, and there'd be lots of.
And I did it all for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that none of this, by the way, for the viewers, none of this will get wasted.
No.
Because every time I come here, nothing gets wasted.
No, you're going to have to speak for the next 20 minutes because I'm just going to have.
You carry on. I'll just.
Rhubarb is my favourite dessert.
Oh, let me give you one. I don't think you got one there. Yeah.
I tell you what sets that
Try
off.
that. Oh.
Is the winter fruits at the bottom.
Yes, because it's got that lightness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And by the way, there's a lot of coffee liqueur in there.
Oh, yeah. Now, the other issue is, of course, that Italians are expert at profiteroles.
Yes.
Which is that wonderful topping. How do you get the profiterole to the right consistency and light enough that it's not like a dough ball?
I've got no idea. I never made profiteroles in my life.
Seriously?
I buy them already made, and then I fill them.
OK, well, there's our excuse for the day. Aldo Zilli buys his own profiteroles. That's like, I think, was it Calendar Girls, the film where she got the award for the cake and she bought it from Marks and Spencer?
By the way, I'm only joking. I'm only joking.
Well,
now,
it's a very good
profiteroles are there's a knack on profiteroles. Profiteroles is not a choux pastry that easy to make.
Right.
Right.
And is that because of the temperature? Right?
It's different temperatures.
Yeah.
You know, it's baking. So it requires a skill. It's not impossible, but you know, it takes a bit of time to learn.
Right.
So once you master it, and the filling of the profiterole, I don't like cream. A lot of chefs fill it with cream and,
so this is like
flavor.
Sort of like a
this is creme
anglaise?
pâtissier.
Oh,
it's
right,
like a creme anglaise. Yeah. And I love that. You see, I think it makes it something. And then
not too sickly or too rich.
No. Yeah. And then at Casa Zilli we serve them with a lovely chocolate sauce on top. With liqueur, but this hasn't got any chocolate sauce. This has got chocolate underneath. So yeah.
And is there something that doesn't work that you shouldn't put together with your leftovers? That you know, all those years where you've tried things, you thought, no, let's not do that again.
Turkey's a bit tricky.
Right.
Reheating turkey and recooking it and putting sauce to it, it's a bit tricky because it's a dry meat and it has a quite bland flavour. Yeah. You can add things to it, but you've got to be. I mean,
which is why we go for turkey curry.
Because it's safe. Yeah. And you give it a lot of flavour. Like the turkey I did this morning for you guys here had a chili, a very special chili. Oil that I make with 7 different chilies plus chili flakes. We cook it, slow cook it for an hour, and then we leave it to cool down for 2 or 3 days.
Right. No wonder Tom's eyes were watering when he came back.
And let me tell you, one of your ladies just came to me. What was in that?
But we should also add that, I mean, you've got to be a bit careful as well. I mean, rice you can't reheat.
Rice you can't reheat.
There's a safety issue about.
You see, we make risotto in Italy. Yeah. We make risotto rice, and we make a risotto for Boxing Day, for Christmas Eve, and then we make arancini with it.
Right.
With the overcooked, with the leftover rice.
Yeah.
So we fill the rice. We put it in the palm of our hand. We put mozzarella.
Like rice balls.
Yeah, we do the rice balls and then we fry them, and then that becomes a delicacy again.
Right.
So it's reviving all these recipes, but you have to stay with some kind of tradition. Is always important.
Right. But there's a very important aspect to this as well. And you were saying you're from a very large family. You weren't.
I was taught this when I was a kid.
Yeah. And you know, lots of families are suffering at the moment with the cost of living crisis. There's an important thing about using what you've got and making it appetising for the rest of the family and feeding your family.
Well, I had 7 brothers and 1 sister, and I was the youngest. You know, and Christmas Day, my brother, the priest, dragged everyone to church, and I was left at home with my mum making all these different recipes. Yeah. And that's how I grew up loving cooking, because of my mum. You know, there's no school here. There's a very big passion, but very little school.
Yeah, and mum's recipes still important?
150%. She would have put together this easy, because it doesn't cost.
Yeah.
Anything that didn't cost a lot of money, she would be all over it.
Yeah, and the dishes as well, as you've done so wonderfully here, and we thank you for sharing. The whole event is to have family and share it together.
Well, we run this thing called Casa Zilli at home, and you don't get a menu, you don't get anything. You come and you share your food, what I give you.
As you have done today, which we thank you for.
But normally I charge a lot of money. Yeah, but for you today, Mark...
Nick Booker, our executive editor, will sort out the bill with you afterwards.
I'm only joking.
I'm going to say thank you very much. Molto bene.
Grazie. Buon anno. Buon anno.
There we go, which was not very far away,
yes.
Is it? It's a bit
buon anno.
Anyway, you've got a bit to go there. You've got to finish off. So
fantastic.
Thank you very much. We'll see you again here on GB News. That's something there for you to savour. But coming else, we've got all the issues of the day with peace talks, perhaps with the Ukraine. Yesterday, the Foreign Minister announcing that they want a summit by the end of February. Could there be a breakthrough in that? We'll be discussing it. But let's take a look at the weather for you now. So we got wet and windy conditions for many, but a bit drier and brighter for the southeast. And then heading up to Scotland, well, we've got that warning of wet, cloudy afternoon, then snow falling over the higher ground, icy conditions too, and windy too, but milder into the late afternoon. A drier afternoon than this morning for Northern Ireland, though still some isolated showers, especially for northern and western coasts. Then rain spreading east across the north of England, some heavy bursts, especially on the high grounds, so be careful with that. A windy day, especially in the lee of any high ground, and the band of rain then spreading across to northern Wales this afternoon. And some of that could be especially heavy over the high ground, Snowdonia and the north. And rather windy too, with coastal gales adding to the difficult conditions there. Rather cloudy afternoon for the East Midlands, patchy rain moving across to the east, and the rain more persistent than some heavy bursts indeed later on. Remaining mild and windier too, and then cloudy but dry initially for East Anglia this afternoon. The rain moving in from the west then later on, but mild conditions, although increasingly windy. For southern England, dry, bright spells for the east, but the rain affecting western areas, and indeed some heavy spells then later on for the southwest, spreading east later. Rain clearing to the east, although some in the far north, and that's how it's shaping up for the rest of the day. Bit of everything there for you.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's just gone 1 o'clock. You're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this hour is Putin ready to make peace? Well, political commentator and Russia expert Danny Armstrong with us to give his take on that continuing war in Ukraine. But could there be peace talks coming up in February? First, though, let's update you on all the headlines of the day. At least 60 people are now believed to have died after what's being described as the once-in-a-lifetime storm continuing to hammer the United States and Canada. The latest we're getting is that 9 inches of snow is falling in New York State. Well, the freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions have left many areas under more than 4 feet of snow so far. The city of Buffalo, New York State, the hardest hit. Emergency services have recovered 27 bodies there, many having frozen to death in their own cars. President Joe Biden has now issued a federal emergency declaration for the state, authorising government assistance for the local recovery efforts. Here, a 23-year-old man's died after being stabbed in a nightclub in Birmingham on Boxing Day. West Midlands police say they were called to the incident just before midnight. They say hundreds of people were at the nightclub at the time and have urged any witnesses to now come forward. Well, Merseyside police are continuing to question 2 people in connection with the fatal shooting of a 26-year-old woman on Christmas Eve. Elle Edwards shot at the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey Village while celebrating Christmas with her family and friends. She was taken to hospital for emergency treatment but died later. A 30-year-old man has now been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, while a 19-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Rail passengers are being told to still expect significant disruption into the new year amid the latest wave of industrial unrest sweeping across the country. These were the scenes at London's King's Cross station earlier. The knock-on effects of strike action on Boxing Day still being felt, with some trains not running until noon. And members of the TSSA at Cross Country are staging a 24-hour strike from 9 p.m. last night, part of a long-running dispute over pay and conditions for them. Meanwhile, teachers' unions have condemned the Scottish Government's decision to delay the rollout of free school meals to all primary school pupils. The EIS union arguing that in a cost-of-living crisis, the food programme is vital to tackle child poverty. The introduction of free school meals for all primary school pupils was due to happen in August. The Scottish Government's defended their delay by saying Scotland had the most generous universal provision of school lunches in the UK. Here in the UK, a yellow weather warning is in place for snow and ice for the north and east of Scotland until tonight. The Met Office says that freezing conditions could last until 10 this evening. They say that travel disruption is possible because of the wintry showers creating patchy ice, mainly on higher routes. Traffic Scotland says its gritters are out on the roads, but that motorists should still plan ahead. So, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has claimed that Russia is ready for peace talks to try to end the war in Ukraine. In a state television interview on Sunday, he said, "It's not us who refuse talks, it's them." Yesterday, Ukraine's foreign minister announced his government's aim to have a peace summit with the United Nations by the end of February, with the Secretary-General as a possible mediator. So, could peace be on the horizon? Well, joining us in the studio to discuss this further, Russia expert Danny Armstrong and political commentator Andy Williams with us once more. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. First, let's just sort of test the water, Danny, as to where we are on this sort of diplomatic dance, if you like. We had suggestions from the Ukrainian foreign minister that they'd be trying to get the UN involved in February, and then both Putin and Lavrov have come out saying, well, yes, but it will be on our conditions. Peace will be on our deal.
Yeah, and of course, one of the biggest condition for that is that Ukraine needs to recognise, or the world needs to recognise, the 4 annexed regions: Zaporizhia, Donetsk People's Republic, Luhansk People's Republic, and of course Kherson. Kherson has been lost so far. That is the main stumbling block for any peace talks, for any negotiations. The Russian side says, look, these need to be recognised. Ukraine can't afford, doesn't want any compromising on their territorial integrity. So that's where, if both sides do sit down to the negotiating table, that is going to be the main thing that they need to get past now.
And the fighting is still going on in those areas. But the other issue, of course, is Crimea, which has effectively been annexed since 2014, by Russia. And one can't imagine that the Ukrainians would go forward with any suggestions without tabling the fact that they want Crimea back too.
Of course, when there was the attack on the Crimean bridge, that was what links Crimea to mainland Russia, which is seen as this great sort of chain between what is thought of as Ukrainian land to the Russian mainland.
Yeah.
It was a hugely symbolic thing that was destroyed, and I think it was the Mikhailo Podolyak, which is basically Zelensky's right-hand man, saying that we need every little bit of Ukraine back before we can sit down and can we talk about an end of this war.
And, of course, it's the access to all the Black Sea ports and getting the grain exports and out through there, The other aspect, of course, is that there may be a reassessment in the Kremlin given what Western weapons have done on the battlefield for the Ukrainians and the fact that maybe Putin was told by his own military leaders, yes, we can do this in a matter of months.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm really pleased we're talking about this, because this issue in the UK and I think elsewhere, people get a bit fatigued after a while talking about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And we need to remember this has been going on for, 9-10 months now. We're going to be coming up to a year. And only if this issue is continually discussed and in the public eye are our politicians in the UK and in America going to continue to provide that support that's so vital, because without it, this may well have been over a long time ago.
Yeah, and is that part of this process that perhaps the back channels behind the scenes, we've got Biden, we've got Scholz in Germany saying, you've got to start thinking at some stage how to bring this to an end, because clearly the appetite is still there as far as the UK is concerned in terms of providing the hardware, but that might not be the case in terms of Germany, for instance.
Yeah, and I think that's doubly so for the US, the public.
The Republicans particularly.
Yes, they're getting tired of funneling billions and millions of dollars into Ukraine. They take the stance that they're tired of being drawn into wars in Europe, and they go right back to the Second World War to say that, look, this is nothing, we shouldn't be supporting it. I think that I would group in, I always have grouped in NATO and the US as one being. They have been sort of very proactive in the months before the war. One of the main pretexts for the invasion was NATO's failure to guarantee that Ukraine wouldn't join the alliance.
Yeah, and indeed, this is the main issue for Putin himself. He sees NATO at the gates to Russia. This is the whole aspect that he is attacking, in his view, to defend his country.
Yes. Well, I think there are 6 now member states of NATO that share a border with Russia. They didn't want that to be 7. Of course, that would be half the countries that share a border with Russia. I think that's completely reasonable. But the way, of course, he's gone about it, invading a NATO state, invading a sovereign state
that wants to be part of NATO.
Exactly. Yes. And of course, there's been this gaslighting from Russia since the invasion. They're saying, look, well, we just want to go there to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. This can all be solved if you just put down your weapons. And it's been going on, as they said, we are ready to sit down to peace talks. But really, are they? They've just blamed the Ukrainian side for not turning up to these peace talks, when in fact they are setting down conditions that are unfavourable and completely unacceptable to the Ukrainian side.
Zelensky, however, must feel that he's got the upper hand, having gone to Washington and seen the support there and the continuing with obviously Boris Johnson off the field of play, if you like, the fact that Sunak has gone also and said, look, we are still with you. Zelensky feels he can still keep pushing the Kremlin.
Yeah, I think that's right. So from a UK standpoint, it's one of the very few issues where there's complete political alignment. Everyone is united on this cross-party. I think that's really, really important that Sunak and Starmer maintain the momentum that Boris Johnson built up while he was Prime Minister. But absolutely, in terms of Zelensky going to Washington, D.C., his profile is enormous. He's almost universally respected. Whatever you think of him, that is the kind of position that people take. And so he has enormous sway. He has massive influence over world leaders all over the world, really. If Zelensky calls, people pick up the phone.
Yeah. Kuleba, the foreign minister who put forward this idea about this UN peace summit in February, has also indicated that, every war comes to an end in a diplomatic way. Well, that might be true to a certain extent, but is it the case that the Ukrainians feel they could still win if this carries on being a military conflict, given that they seem to have defeated the Russian armoured columns, particularly, that a lot of their tanks are aging, they're running out of ammunition,
Yeah.
and clearly a very demoralised Russian army as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the general consensus in Ukraine was the fact that they built up such momentum and they'd had these huge victories in Kharkiv in the northeast and in Kherson, of course. It was a huge symbolic victory for them to regain Kherson. Of course, we do know that
at a price, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Well, the Russians kind of retreated from Kherson a little bit before the Ukrainians came in, but still it was a huge, huge victory. During these winter months, it's going to be very difficult to get anything done on the ground operation. Of course, there's drone strikes, bomb strikes and anything like that. That's why there's talk now about peace talks, because there is time to take a little bit of a pause. But I think it's something that Russia has been pushing for since they've seen these losses, quite embarrassing losses on the battlefield, and symbolically, I think it's been quite disastrous for them in the past few months.
Last question, what about Putin himself? Increasing number of reports suggesting that he is growing increasingly frail, that he may have Parkinson's, they say, he may have some kind of cancer, and that may be affecting even his decision-making process.
Where are these reports from?
Right, well, that's the question, isn't it?
Is
this the war of disinformation, or...?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd know a thing or two about that, but like with working in Russia for so long in the media, I think that from the same sources that plug headlines with nuclear war in it, the threat of nuclear war is always going to be beneficial to each side more than actual nuclear war, which benefits nobody. And these are the same people who use nuclear war as a recycled headline. They use Putin is going to die soon as the same means that they're mentioning peace talks and things like that, because they want to see an end to this war, and they see an end to this war if Putin is in ill health. But for Russia, if Putin does meet his end before in an untimely manner, then that would be a disaster. It would completely shatter the machismo image, the macho image that he's...
A political vacuum as well?
It would likely do so, yes. I mean, Putin's been in power now for more than 2 decades, so I think it would be the large shoes to fill and a very, very difficult time.
Yeah. OK, well, we'll see what happens. And as we say, obviously, the fact is that they've got this offer on the table for February if the UN picks it up and tries to take that forward. Danny, for the moment, thank you for that. And you're back with us a little later as well to discuss other issues, because there's plenty to talk about, particularly, of course, with the situation in the United States with this blizzard, the worst for 45 years, we're being told, still hammering the United States and Canada. The New York governor, Kathy Hochul, saying that the winter storm has left what's like a war zone. Indeed, at least 60 people have died, we're being told, in total. Search operations still going on, the snow still falling. And some forecasters predicting that Britain could see, yes, problems in January, though the Met Office has spoken out against such reports, but a yellow weather warning in place for Scotland until this evening. So let's discuss the situation once more with Jim Dale, the British Weather Service's senior meteorologist, joining us once more. And Jim, last hour we were talking about the situation in the United States, where you were saying that it could change as quickly as it came, where we had a drop in temperatures which created this problem, and it could go back up pretty rapidly, and then we've got flooding as the next issue they've got to deal with.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. The actual freeze itself with the snow happened with huge rapidity. There were some, temperatures 10, 15 degrees plus before the freeze arrived, and within an hour they'd gone to the likes of minus.
I think we seem to have lost our link there with Jim Dale, so apologies for that. We'll try and re-establish communications, but let's just reflect on what we are looking at in terms of the reaction to this. Andy is still with us here in the studio, and I seem to remember that disaster film where they had this event where everything froze, and I think it was Dennis Quaid, and he had to tramp up to rescue. I mean, it's happened in real life, where this has been so quick and so severe that even the sort of sophisticated preparations the United States has have not been able to cope with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying to see, particularly at this time of year. I'm sure it's ruined a lot of Christmases and left people stranded in all sorts of places. So, yeah, really, really worrying. I think the thing that struck me was just how severe some of these temperatures are. I think I was seeing -30, -40 degrees Celsius. I mean, you can't even imagine, really.
Yeah, and the fact that I think that the winds were hurricane force blowing the snow as well. And Danny, just to bring you back in, of course, as you said, you've lived in Moscow.
Yes.
They seem to deal with these things a lot better without the technology. I mean, I remember going to Moscow and seeing them sort of just putting sand out on the road, for instance.
Yeah, well, no, they do have the sort of heavy-duty trucks that spray, grains of salt about the size of your fist over the pavement, and they deal with it really, really well. It's half of the fun of living in Russia. You have 6 months of winter. It gets down to around about -30, -31. I mean, I'm from Manchester, so it's like shorts and T-shirts weather for me.
Talking of flooding, yeah. Well, I think we can head back to Jim. Thank you for that, gentlemen. Jim, sorry, our signal dropped out with you. I was going to blame the weather.
Line, I think.
Yeah, well, we can blame the weather for lots of things, but let's just sort of reflect on what's happened in the United States. I mean, is it going to make a lot of people rethink? And, we've talked about the problems of global warming and climate change and so on.
Yeah, that's an extremely good question. This is you get events like this. We had our own summer, of course, with the heat wave and the record temperatures, and I do think it makes people think. There will always be a contingent of people, make this absolutely clear, who will sit in their back bedroom pressing buttons, denying everything that ever occurred, denying the climatologists who are well versed in looking at these things. But this kind of event, I'm not saying this particular event that happened in the United States is, that's definitely climate change. For the moment, it is a severe weather event. You've got to look back in the months and years to come and suggest whether that has been a part of the dislocation of the polar vortex, etc., and whether that's been made more likely by climate change, by warmer air moving into the Arctic and the colder air being displaced. So all of that is to be discussed. But certainly, Matt, the discussion, it opens the discussion as the last year in the United Kingdom are very, very similar. All the different events, the storms that we had, 5 major storms at the beginning of the year, then the drought and the heat, and then we got the trough.
The weather a lot more, and we're looking ahead to January. I hope we've still got our connection with you. As you say, it's been dropping out. But just to ask you quickly about January, we've got all the papers suggesting all snow on the way again, but we're not likely to see, I think it was the troll from Trondheim we called it, returning.
Yeah, that's what I called it. I got out there quite before everybody else because I know how these things catch a light. Look, no, not at the moment. I'm tending to agree with, I think the Met Office put a statement out saying we can't see that, and I can't see it either. Not at this moment in time. But Mark, we're only a month into winter. There's 2 months of it to go, and maybe a bit of March that, for the caveat on top. It usually arrives in some shape or form. I'll be very surprised if we don't see some more snow from time to time, particularly in the north, but everything to play for at the moment.
OK, we'll be back to you. Apologies again for the signal going out, but as we said, we can blame the weather, can't we? Jim, as ever, thanks very much for updating us. Cheers. Now, let's return to the travel picture, because we've got the latest round of strikes by the RMT officially coming to an end at 6 this morning, but many services only just got going again at 12 noon today. Indeed, these were the busy scenes at London's King's Cross station, the knock-on effects of the industrial action at all the major transport hubs. And, of course, people, despite being told only to make essential journeys, deciding at Christmas, yes, it might be time to make an essential journey to visit your friends and family. Anyway, Network Rail saying 70% of services operating, but urging passengers still to check their travel times. And they're also being prepared to get ready for significant disruption into the new year amid further strikes on our way. Well, joining us to discuss the situation, editor of the Greater London Transport newsletter, Richard Town. Richard, thank you for being with us. Mentioning the rail, and I think we've got buses on strike as well in south and west of London as well.
I'm afraid so, yes. Unite bus service crews are taking industrial action against, unfortunately, London Transport particularly, which is chaired by a Labour mayor. And this should not be happening. The interconnection, the only advantage between having a Labour mayor and a Labour Greater London Authority and is that he chairs Transport for London, and therefore he should be able to resolve through his friendly, fraternal relations with the union workers, but he's not.
However, well, that may well indicate the degree of frustration, unease amongst workers, not just in terms of their pay, but their working conditions as well, because this seems to feed into all these transport issues.
There is a certain amount of taking advantage of the current industrial situation, and there is a certain amount of left to hard left situations going on where they're trying to claim that there's a national strike occurring. You see other unions not involved in transport also taking industrial action as well. I term it, and as a former councillor myself, I term it as a political strike, and it's a national political strike. We cannot return back to the days of Ted Heath and February and October '74.
Yeah. Okay, we reflect, obviously, a national or general strike only happens when the TUC can call that as such, and no indications that the Trades Union Congress would do that. However, each of these individual union leaders does make the point they are fighting for the conditions of their own members. And the common theme, if there is one, they're saying that they've had 10 years of frustration in terms of real pay falling behind what inflation is doing to their working conditions.
Certainly. I've been a union member all my life. When I first went in the Navy when I was 15, and when I left the Met, I was in the PCS, and I think I was the only known Tory to have actually stood on a picket line. Yeah. So being in a union is an advantage to every worker in this country, but taking industrial action which actually damages the country, and we're on the way back to beating Frankfurt, New York and Paris from their economic trials to try to take over UK's prominent position in financial services is quite wrong. And we've got to look after the country's status. Already,
any suggestion that there will be some kind of breakthrough in the new? What's going to take the two sides to sort of get back from pretty entrenched positions they're in at the moment?
Well, firstly, I think we should put out a big thank you to the 14,500 roughly members of the RMT, which did not support in ballot the strike action. Many of those braved the cold shoulder of their worker colleagues to actually provide some sort of service. There was very few trains running. We were down to less than 30% during the height of the dispute, but nevertheless a big thank you to them, and also to ASLEF and the negotiating teams there who've done a settlement.
Yeah, well, we've got a one-day strike coming up with ASLEF, the train drivers, of course, in January, so we're not quite there yet, are we?
This is working practices. As I say, when I was on the picket line and when I took industrial action, the lone Tory one, I suppose, we had negotiations going on at the same time. We did not stop strike action. We did not stop taking emergency calls into control centres when I was working for the police. So I'm asking and hoping that they will continue their working practices discussion and continue working at the same time. The same thing goes for TSSA as well.
OK. Richard, thank you very much indeed. Greater London Transport newsletter, of course, with all the updates on where you can or can't go, as it may be at the moment. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
You're watching GB News Live. Coming up, the Levelling Up Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, with calling a revival of traditional architecture to boost new homes. He hopes to meet demand, but also getting some design classics, unlike perhaps these. That's coming up in a moment.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Now, let's talk about Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, who's criticised indifferent or insipid, as he said, planning applications, saying opposition to new housing projects could be reduced if they were actually designed in a better way. Well, Mr Gove also suggesting that the potential of public spaces is not being utilised. Not sure if he includes the M25 in that. However, he's supporting a call by a think tank, Policy Exchange, for a new national school of urban design and architecture. Meanwhile, a national charity, Unipol, says that student housing is reaching a crisis point. Many young people forced to surf the couches or stay with mum and dad because of unsuitable accommodation. We're here once more to discuss the issues. Our political commentator for the day, Andy Williams, and Reem Ibrahim back with us as well. Thank you for being with us once more, because Michael Gove likes to be a bit of a revolutionary in these issues, but many might feel he's got a point this time when one looks at sort of the anonymous faces of most of our modern towns and cities.
I think that he has a point. I'm very, very glad to see the Levelling Up Secretary actually understand that we need to increase the supply of housing and that we need to be building more. What I think is interesting, though, is that he's sort of focusing on this idea behind the actual design of the architecture. We don't sort of talk about the huge amounts of red tape and regulation that are sort of imposing on our housing. And actually, that's why a lot of these planning regulations don't come through, because they're sort of the local sort of call them NIMBYs, sort of oppose these new housing developments, and it's purely due to the fact that we've got so much regulation. The amount of windows, stairs, the sort of different amounts of buildings that they are, how tall they can be, the fact that you can't build a 5-storey building as it passes Zone 4, Zone 5 in London, I think is ridiculous. We need to increase the supply of housing and get rid of this government red tape.
But don't we also need to make everywhere a nice place to live? And the criticism is that you get these housing estates of, as they call them, stunning 4- and 5-bedroom executive homes, and they're nothing like that. And many people who live in many of the home counties, towns and villages, say they're just not suitable for where they're being put in.
I think that I'd love to see some beautiful housing being built, but I'd like to see housing being built full stop. The government are trying to sort of have this housing target of 300,000 by 2025. I welcome that target, and I think that is a positive step forward in housing development across the country. But we do not build nearly enough homes, nearly as much homes as we need to be doing. And actually, I think what we need to see is so much more housing being built, and it's the government sort of getting in their own way, shooting themselves in the foot with these regulations. You can encourage sort of building companies to build more homes, but actually, if they have to try and surpass all of this regulation and red tape, it's very difficult for them to do so.
Yeah. Just one thing before we stay with this issue. Just get your reaction to something that the Daily Mail's just come up with, that Jacob Rees-Mogg is considering running to be the next leader of the Tory party and could make a bid if they lose the next election. That's just coming on Daily Mail online. Really?
I mean, he's not necessarily somebody I would like to see leading the party. I am a Tory party member, so if there is a leadership election, I do get a vote. And I think that he's not necessarily somebody that sort of has that, I guess, free market libertarian vision that I'd like to see in the party. I don't know why he's sort of throwing his hat in the ring now, of all times.
Well, could it be because the party is trailing Labour by more than 20 points, one wonders?
I mean, if Jacob Rees-Mogg becomes leader of the Conservative Party, he'll be the Jeremy Corbyn of the Conservative Party. I mean, it's so ludicrous, the idea that he could even remotely come anywhere near to being the leader of a major political party. It's just madness. But he does have great faith in his own abilities. So.
Yeah. Could it be that he's been told that he will be the leader of the Johnsonites, that he's going to sort of carry on carrying that flag?
Well, the truth is, I think that, firstly, Johnson doesn't really have a tribe apart from the people who... Johnson's tribe is whoever's supporting him at any one time, right?
Whereas There's no such thing as Johnsonism.
There is not, no. Whereas I think Jacob Rees-Mogg, very clearly, he is in that ERG... on the right
member
of
from the 17th century of some of his
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, look, clearly, for as long as the Tories are trailing by 20, 25 points in the polls, there will be more leadership talk.
Yeah.
I don't think it's credible that they can change the leader again before a general election, but there will be people who want to see Rishi Sunak shape up or ship out.
Hung, drawn and quartered, some may say. Yeah, anyway, just to return to this issue of housing, I mean, Michael Gove has obviously been aware of the unease on the backbenches, many Tory councillors as well, about the rash of housing developments. And clearly that's not gone down well with many Tory party supporters, even if they are called NIMBYs, and they've had to rethink their approach.
Yeah, I'm with Reem on this. I'm massively in favour of anything we can do to get rid of the blockage on new housing developments. We really need it, particularly for young people in this country. If you're looking at it purely from a political standpoint, if you want to win over under 35s to vote for your party, you need to be in favour of more affordable and therefore more housing. And I think actually I understand why people who've lived in towns and villages for a long time don't want to see more developments in their areas, but we need to do something.
But is part of the problem that there's a stranglehold from the big developers, the Persimmons, the Barratts and so on, and they're just building the same kind of stuff, and it's anonymous. Some of it's actually not very good quality, as a lot of building researchers has found out. Mortar that's not mixed correctly, and people have problems even 5 years down the line.
Yeah, no, there is something kind of depressing about these identikit housing estates rising up and with very little thought given to how they look and how they're going to look in 5 or 10 years' time, let alone 20 or 50. You only have to go to places like Bath to see that there were periods in our history where we were able to build beautiful cities.
Yeah.
So I welcome this proposal from Policy Exchange because we could do with more thought going into what our housing, what our spaces look like.
Yeah, what about the whole issue of design and how things appear? And a lot of people are saying, well, industrial chic is back in. We should be making more of brownfield sites and converting old industrial blocks. And I think John Lewis are looking at converting some of their old stores now into accommodation.
I think that would be fantastic. I think that looking at the green belt is one area where we can sort of build on the green belt. I think it's only about
really. You want to build on the green belt?
Well, a lot of the Green Belt isn't actually green. I mean, some of it is
I think you might lose a few more votes from Tory party supporters if
it's
you
exactly
vote with that,
isn't it? It's this balancing act between trying to support what the young people want, and young people do want housing, and also sort of supporting those that actually traditionally do vote Conservative, thinking about the sort of the shires or sort of these sort of areas around the country where they don't want more housing. These NIMBYs, and if in order to win over the NIMBYs, we need to change up our architecture and change up the sort of planning that we do. I would welcome it. I think Policy Exchange maybe have the right idea.
Yeah, but what would you say to those who say you then basically destroy the very thing that you're trying to create, that people won't want to live there when it becomes yet another rash of housing and garages and fast food outlets and so on, anonymous Britain?
I think that this is sort of the future of Britain, right? It doesn't have to be anonymous. I mean, we can have beautiful housing being built, without all of this government regulation. The government's regulations at the moment don't sort of decide, the type of architecture that we have.
Right.
But if local authorities and local councils will support housing that is sort of older style, this sort of changing up the way the architecture looks, if that is the case, then yeah, we can support them.
Last question. Who decides what is good design? I mean, we remember this quote, I've got it from 1984, certain Prince Charles, about the monstrous carbuncle on the face of a much-loved and elegant friend, talking about the extension to the National Gallery. And yet, some bits of modern architecture do actually age quite well. So who's decide what is the right thing to design and build at the moment?
Yeah, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? No, very, very tricky one. But I think what we can all agree on is that some of these anonymous housing estates, as you say, I don't think in 50 years' time people are going to be willing to defend those.
Yeah. Would you live in, I think, Battersea Power Station is one of those that's been converted? I mean, would you be happy?
They've done a great job with Battersea Power Station. I was down there about 3 weeks ago, and it looks amazing. I would have liked to have seen a few more sort of independent shops and restaurants put in, rather than all of the chains that have kind of engulfed it. But broadly, they've done a pretty good job with that one. OK, neo-Georgian executive home or industrial unit in an old warehouse?
I think I do particularly like the older sort of, I guess it's sort of Georgian townhouse that you sort of find across Liverpool and sort of northern cities. That really, really quite beautiful. We should be building more of those. But again, I think the point of the matter is we want more housing.
Yeah, OK. Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll see what Mr. Go comes up with his designs and drawing book. Can't wait. Anyway, your views on what's been happening. Christopher, very quickly, all of the following require funding: NHS, police, border force, transport, schools. Therefore, are we still spending 14 billion a year in foreign aid? Lewis, net zero for the British people means net zero money in your pocket, the country going back to the dark ages. Poverty taking place, he says, while Nick says divert public subsidies away from rail services and give it to the armed forces as a bonus. I think many of you suggesting that they're doing quite well at the airports with the passport checks. Coming up, a warning over lithium batteries and the fire risk. Yes, don't chuck out your old electricals this Christmas without checking them first. We're back in a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
And welcome back to GB News Live. And let's bring you a bit of breaking news, good news on the economy, because the Boxing Day figures are coming through for what they call footfall. That's the number of people going through shops and visiting restaurants, theatres and so on, up by more than a third across the UK's high street on this time last year. Concerns, of course, that the strikes and budgets could be scaring consumers away from town and city centres. But the latest we're getting from the industry analyst Springboard is that footfall was 38.8% higher than last year. Increases in three areas. High streets up 44.1%, shopping centres 40.4%, and retail parks by 25.9%. Central London, of course, hit the hardest by the transport strikes. Actually, the increase is, for the last 24 hours, up about 39%. So Springboard saying that people have decided to get out and about, particularly because it's a Sunday, they believe, to go shopping. London's West End performing particularly strongly, we're told. Its footfall up 65% on Boxing Day last year. So I hope maybe that's transmitted into better sales and takings for pubs and restaurants across the capital. Now, with Christmas out of the way, it's likely that your old electrical goods are heading for the rubbish tip, having been replaced by shiny new ones. But before you chuck them away, local authorities are urging you to consider battery-powered gadgets to stop fires in bin lorries and rubbish depots, because lithium-ion batteries found in many rechargeable items, such as toothbrushes and laptops, cause more than £150 million in damage every year, we're being told. The problem getting worse, as Will Hollis now reports.
It started out as just a small fire, but quickly spread until this multi-million-pound waste site in Aberdeen was ablaze. What caused it? Probably the battery in a toothbrush. What's worse is that fires like this happen a lot. Research by Material Focus, a non-profit encouraging you to recycle electricals, found that around 700 fires are started by batteries in bin lorries and at rubbish tips each year. Only a few months ago, it happened here in Colville, where John is a waste manager for the county council.
This is where people put their non-recyclable rubbish, usually in black bags. It's normally full, it's empty today because the site's closed. And a few weeks ago, we had a fire here, which we believe was caused by a laptop that was incorrectly disposed of. Had to close the site down, call the fire brigade to put the fire out.
With Christmas over, it's likely you'll be throwing away your old electricals. Most are powered by rechargeable lithium-ion batteries. When they get chucked away with the regular rubbish or recycling, they become a fire hazard, so-called zombie batteries.
So this is a rechargeable lithium-ion battery. This has come out of a laptop. We've got other sorts of similar batteries here. This has come off a Dyson. This has come off a power tool.
The Environmental Services Association says that more than £150 million in damage is caused by lithium battery fires every year. Ben is an environmental consultant. He says getting rid of batteries properly is simple but effective.
Fires are a perennial issue for our sector because people put all sorts of flammable things in their waste that they shouldn't. But what we are seeing is that specifically lithium-ion batteries are responsible for a growing proportion of the fires that we face. They really are quickly becoming the number one culprit. So we would urge people, absolutely please, recycle your batteries, all batteries, but particularly lithium-ion, separately using proper battery recycling banks or small waste electrical recycling banks.
As our dependence on recharging grows, Ben hopes that new laws will make it easier to recycle batteries in the right way.
Next year, government's consulting on the battery regulations, and what we're hoping to see is that slightly tougher regulations are put on producers of batteries, which in turn will help to fund collection infrastructure and make it much easier for people to recycle batteries.
The end of any gadget's life will undoubtedly leave it discarded. But if that's in the wrong way, it could easily return from the dead and haunt. Will Hollis for GB News in Colville.
So a warning to us all, check the way that you dispose of those batteries. Now, let's just update you on your views still coming in. Plenty of you wanted to get your views off your chest this Christmas period. Francis has been in touch to say prices are high because of greedy energy companies and poor government decisions. I think that might refer to the fact that many energy companies are still sitting on lots of our cash and pushing up the direct debit payments, even though you might be in credit. Ian says Labour would likely still have us in lockdown. The recession would be no different. We would still be in the EU, so tied up to their failings. I think that's when we were discussing the way ahead for Labour and the Tory party in the next 12 months or so. Gina, meanwhile, saying the Conservative Party is no longer conservative, rendering it impotent. This is the problem with liberalism, she says. Labour going the same way, if not worse. Doesn't leave you much choice, Gina, does it? Anyway, according to research now in the Times newspaper today, middle-class families could be up to £40,000 worse off in the next decade as a result of Jeremy Hunt's stealth taxes, trying to reduce, of course, government borrowing. Well, economists have warned that the decision could drag thousands more families into paying tax at a time when earnings, of course, failing to keep pace with inflation. Indeed, research from the House of Commons Library showing a family with two earners on £60,000 a year each will be £40,880 worse off over the next decade. That's if tax thresholds had risen in line with inflation. Well, joining us to discuss what this means, Professor Ian Begg, Research Fellow at the LSE European Institute. Ian, thank you very much for joining us. And just to explain to people, this is what they call fiscal drag, where the tax bands don't keep up with inflation, which, of course, is roaring away still.
Well, yes, it's not cross-dressing. It's a form of tax, which means that because the threshold doesn't rise, it catches more and more people as their incomes go up. It's not to do with prices, it's only to do with incomes. If your income rises 10% and you move into a new band, you'll be taxed where you would not otherwise be. In the past, those bands would tend to rise with inflation and therefore be fairly neutral in the tax system. But it's an easy way for a government to raise more tax because it doesn't have to do anything with a headline, like raising a tax rate. It simply has to wait for the tax threshold to bite more heavily on those who arguably have more capacity to pay it.
Yeah, and the political argument, of course, we should reflect Gordon Brown, a great advocate who brought in these so-called stealth taxes. And many economists wonder, does it actually do the job in that at a time when maybe you're trying to get the economy going, it literally reduces people's spending power?
It does, but if you put spending power in the pockets of the lowest income people, they will tend to spend more of it. So targeting is the way in which you get a better result in terms of getting more injection of spending into the economy. if you impose the taxes on much better off people, they're less likely to spend it, more likely simply to reduce savings as the way they cope with it.
Yeah. Is the problem that middle band, and particularly the issue is when you go into that higher 40% band, that many middle-class, middle earners will find themselves a lot worse off, and really, people are saying they can be the pump priming, if you like, for the British economy.
Well, they can, but you need to look at all the other bits of the income distribution to work out where you have the biggest impact on getting tax, as opposed to the most negative impact on reducing their spending power. There's a particularly surprising little stealth tax that bites at £100,000 income, which is that those with an income over that will lose their tax allowance, the income tax allowance that everybody benefits
Personal allowances,
from. So in effect, what that means is that between an income of 100,000 and 125 or so thousand, your tax rate goes up to 60%, not the 40%. That's the higher rate. And this sits badly with the higher rate, which only starts at 150,000, is now going to go down to 125.
Yeah, and a lot of people will be sort of doing their sums in the new year, wondering, is it worth me actually staying in work? I mean, we've got the sort of government trying to encourage people back into work, and other issues such as lifetime allowance on pensions mean that a lot of sort of top earners, including NHS consultants, have just decided to pack it in and retire.
Yes, and that's how incentives work. If you think that your effective tax rate is going to be astronomical, then why bother is going to be the straightforward question. And this means that the government is going to have to look far more comprehensively at its structure of tax to work out whether it has the right way of raising revenue, which it has to do, but at the same time doesn't create disincentives to work, or to work harder, or to work overtime in a way which negates the impact on the economy. So it's a tricky balance, but I think the government has gone too far in the direction of not indexing these tax thresholds.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question. Is it going to work, bearing in mind they've got 2 years or less to a general election? And in terms of trying to produce that feel-good factor that gets people to just decide to vote any political party, is this going to do the trick within that 2 years?
Probably not, because the gains for the public finances are going to be offset by any reduction in the size of the economy. We know that there's a reasonable prospect of the economy being in recession for at least the first 6 months of this year, of next year, sorry. Now, I think it's going to be a mild recession. Recession gets a very antagonistic press, because people say, if you had what we had in the first 6 months of 2020, when the pandemic hit, the economy shrank dramatically. I think what we'll see in the next 6 months is a very shallow recession, and possibly the beginnings of a recovery in the second half of next year. At the same time, inflation is just starting to fall.
Yeah.
Those of you who have filled up on petrol will have noticed that petrol prices are now down something like 10% since the peak earlier in the year.
And certainly the RAC and the AA saying that they should be cheaper even than that, given what the wholesale prices are. But the other reflection, I don't know whether this paints a picture for us, the footfall pictures for Boxing Day, and Springboard industry analysts looking at what's happening on the high streets, particularly central London. I mean, up pretty dramatically on last year. I mean, clearly there's still some appetite left there in the economy.
Well, footfall is one thing. That's the people traipsing through the shops or the shopping centres. What you really want to know is, are they spending their hard-earned dosh? Because if they're not, then footfall could just be a form of tourism, looking into what's going on in the shops. I think we will get a far more significant signal when we hear more about retail spending.
Yeah.
It's encouraging, yes, that people are going to the shops, but you need to know whether they will then open their wallets and spend more.
Yeah, and of course what the shops have had to discount in terms of getting people to buy stuff and any profit being made and so on. But anyway, a little bit of light perhaps for the economy. Professor Ian Begg,
So a good Scotsman like me, the fact that they're discounting is great.
That's good news indeed. Professor Ian Begg from the LSE, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And of course, we'll see what those retail sale figures do when they come through for the new year. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks. But let's just get Andy's view here in the studio. Have you dared to go out and brave the sales yet? Or...
Certainly not, no. And I won't be either. I have no interest in fighting through crowds on Oxford Street.
Yeah, however, I mean, you know, all these bits of the jigsaw are important in actually deciding, of course, whether people are going to vote a Conservative government back in, the feel-good factor. Do we feel as if we're better off? Have we got more money to spend? And the answer from many people, no, they haven't.
Absolutely, and not only do they not have compared to last year, but most people don't have as much money as they could spend even 15 years ago. If you look at real wages, they haven't recovered since the 2008 financial crisis, so there's that. Obviously, taxes are going up, and politically it's a very interesting picture, because remember, it's only 3.5 months since Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng came in with this budget that was going to slash taxes, absolutely. And now we've done a 180, or I say we, the Conservative government has done a 180, and we're now back in that kind of austerity picture that we haven't seen since David Cameron and George Osborne left office. So it's completely U-turned, and there's no good news anywhere on the horizon from a tax perspective.
Will they have to do another political volte-face at some time when they realise, you know, when that election date's getting ever nearer, and deciding, well, from political expediency, dump austerity and start pumping the money into the system again?
Well, on paper, you'd expect that they will be saving up a headline tax cut, probably for sort of mid-learners, for immediately before the election. I think that was the agreement that Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson had in place, but let's see.
Yeah, indeed. Andy, thank you for that. And, of course, we'll assess that all the figures come through in the new year. Now, what's the weather doing if you're heading out and about to those sales? Well, we've got windy conditions for many, cloud and outbreaks of rain moving east, so a wet evening for southwest England. Rain and drizzle, gusty winds too, but mild for the time of year. Temperatures of around 11 Celsius is the high. Then showery outbreaks of rain continuing this evening across much of the southeast of England, with some brisk southwesterly winds. Temperatures around 9 Celsius. Then the rain clearing east across Wales this evening, although taking its time to clear for the south and east of Wales. Staying windy too, and a cloudy end of the day then as we head up to the Midlands, with further spells of rain there. Could be heavy at times, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. Breezy too, temperatures around 9 Celsius once more there. Then outbreaks of rain continuing to move east this evening across northern England, with the rain heavy at times, but should be drier then from the west as the evening goes on. Temperatures, yes, around 9 degrees once more. Scattered showers following today's rain and snow then across Scotland, although we've still got that yellow weather warning in place. The showers falling as snow, therefore, on the higher ground, with icy stretches with temperatures close to freezing. Largely dry end of the day for Northern Ireland, plenty of clear spells, just a few showers possible. Staying blustery, though, particularly across the coast and the hills. Heading overnight, mostly dry in the north, but icy stretches once more for Scotland, and rain returning in the south.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 2 o'clock and you're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst. Coming up in this hour of the programme, nearly 46,000 migrants have crossed the Channel from France to the UK this year, a huge leap on 2021. But former Prime Minister Theresa May warning that the government's attempts to change the law and clamp down on bogus asylum claims could backfire. We'll be discussing that in detail. And we're asking if policing all those Just Stop Oil protests in this last year was a waste of police time and money. We're joined by a former Scotland Yard detective to unpick that issue. Let us know too what you're up to today and how you're coping with this Betwixtmas, as it's called. I didn't make it up. GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet us, of course, at GB News. But before that, let's get the latest news headlines with Ray.
Thanks, Mark. 1 minute past 2, here's the latest. At least 60 people are now believed to have died as winter storms continue to hammer the US and Canada. The freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions, which have been described as once in a lifetime, have left many areas under more than 4 feet of snow. The city of Buffalo in New York State has been the hardest hit, with emergency services recovering 27 bodies, with many people freezing to death in their cars. President Joe Biden has declared a federal emergency for New York State and authorised government assistance for local recovery efforts.
Polar vortex, which is the pool of cold air over the Arctic, has swooped down over the United States, brought very, very, very cold temperatures. I had minus 40. Lizards are raining from the sky because the wildlife is freezing on the trees. The National Weather Service in the United States says that it's going to improve in the run-up to New Year, and there will be a thaw. But with the thaw, all that snow thawing, if you can see all that snow is going to thaw, they're possibly looking at flooding, which is another problem.
And that was weather journalist Nathan Rao. A 23-year-old man has died after being stabbed at a nightclub in Birmingham on Boxing Day. West Midlands police say they were called to the incident just before midnight. They say hundreds of people were at the nightclub at the time and have urged any witnesses to come forward. Weather journalist Nathan Rao, sorry. Well, meanwhile, Merseyside police are continuing to question 2 people in connection with the fatal shooting of a 26-year-old woman on Christmas Eve. Elle Edwards was shot at the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey Village while celebrating Christmas with family and friends. A 30-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, while a 19-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Rail passengers are being told to expect significant disruption into the new year amid a wave of industrial unrest sweeping across the country. There were busy scenes at London's King's Cross station earlier due to the effects of Boxing Day strike action. Members of the TSSA at Cross Country staged a 24-hour strike from 9 p.m. yesterday as part of a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The Levelling Up Secretary says opposition to new housing developments could be reduced by focusing on better design. Michael Gove says too many planning applications are indifferent or insipid, and the potential of some public spaces is not being utilised. He's supporting calls from the Policy Exchange think tank for a new National School of Urban Design and Architecture. Teachers' unions have condemned the Scottish Government's decision to delay the rollout of free school meals to all primary school pupils. EIS says the food programme is vital to tackle child poverty during the cost of living crisis. The introduction of free school meals for primary school pupils was due to happen back in August. The Scottish Government has defended the delay, saying Scotland has the most generous universal provision of free school lunches in the UK. A yellow weather warning is in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland. The Met Office says freezing conditions could last until 10 a.m. tomorrow. Travel disruption is possible as wintry showers create patchy ice, mainly on higher routes. Traffic Scotland says motorists should plan ahead. OK, you're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Mark.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. So, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has announced that he's ready for peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. Well, that statement follows reports of air raid sirens across Ukraine. That's just coming into us at the moment. And at least 10 people reported dead in the Ukrainian city of Kherson after a rocket attack there over the weekend. But yesterday, Ukraine's foreign minister announced his government's aim to have a peace summit by the end of February with the UN and the Secretary-General as a possible mediator. Could that be the beginning of the end of war in Ukraine? Well, joining us to discuss the issue now, international security expert Will Geddes. Will, thanks for coming in. Good to be with you again. As we say, as we speak, we're getting these reports of the air raid sirens going off across all of Ukraine. And this does seem to be the future for operations at the moment, that even though the Russians aren't succeeding militarily on the ground, they're attacking lots of civilian targets with air power.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, Mark, it's literally trying to smash the will and determination out of Ukraine. Because the one thing that we certainly know with Ukrainian people, and certainly their efforts in this conflict, is that they have proven to be far more robust and resilient than the Russian troops. And they're winning on many, many different levels. I mean, certainly the retreat by Russian forces out of Kherson was a huge psychological damage to their troops, the Russian troops on the ground, and a huge psychological advantage to Ukraine. So what the Russians will be doing quite simply right now will be to sending in various different sporadic IDF or indiscriminate direct fire into basically the local population to try and crush their will.
Yeah, and we've seen them targeting the power supply network quite effectively, because obviously until they get the Patriot air defence system, they're still using Soviet-era air defence weapons.
Yeah.
But given the fact that we've got the winter now and we're unlikely to see much movement on the ground from either side, is this why they're starting to think about some kind of diplomatic solution?
Well, a bit of both, actually. I mean, we know that certainly in Afghanistan, when I was down in Afghanistan, certainly this was after the Russian conflict down there in Russia, trying to occupy Afghanistan, that one of the things the Taliban had to their advantage was that they were defeating Russia and really, again, destroying their capabilities in Afghanistan during the winter months.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that many people find it very surprising, Mark. They think that Russia, being a very cold nation, or generally regarded as a very cold nation, they would be more prepared for fighting in those kind of conditions. However, it is a brutal and savage winter. And although Ukraine will be wanting to, again, regroup, as Russia will at this particular time, not to try and push too hard whilst it is winter warfare, I think this is the moment that Ukraine will push through, and they will continue to take ground. They're certainly annexing or re-annexing Crimea. We know that their missiles and their capabilities can actually reach those resupply routes that the Russians are taking.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the fighting is still taking place on the eastern areas, Kherson, as you mentioned, the other side of the Dnipro River, where the Russians have now sort of halted operations. But Crimea could be the key to this. One thinks that Zelensky is unlikely to enter any kind of talks until there is an agreement to return Crimea to the Ukraine.
You know, well, I mean, if I was to crystal ball gaze here, Mark, and it is literally crystal ball gazing, I think there will have to be some concession on both sides. Now, Donbass has been known, certainly Russian friends of mine who said to me that whereas the academics and the political dissidents would be sent off to gulags, all the general criminals would have been sent historically down to the Donbass region. So it's not a well-loved, nurtured area. But there is a question of pride by Zelensky and by Ukraine to not wanting to relinquish it. But it could be that's the impasse where there could be negotiation and bartering for Crimea to return to Ukraine and Donbass perhaps to be annexed.
Where large areas are Russian-speaking.
Correct.
Got the cultural
and
links,
very pro-Russian, pro-Putin.
Yeah. Is there a reassessment, however, going on in the Kremlin where perhaps his military leaders had told him that this was achievable, within months, and clearly that's backfired? A lot of the kit, the old tanks, the armoured vehicles, have not proved to be robust or even serviced in terms of going into battle, and therefore the political reality is starting to come home to Putin.
Well, I think that, in addition to 5 assassination attempts against Putin this year alone, will show you that there is somewhat of a disagreement within camp or in-house, if you like. I think certainly as far as Putin is prepared to go, there's some 250,000 troops, some half of that, 50%, has already been deployed. The others are being readied. You also have this weird mix of members of the Wagner PMC, the private military company. You have Chechens, which are also supportive and pro-Putin, but none of them play well together. They all want to take their own little section. They want to manage that section. And the problem is, with the way that the battle is going right now, and the conflict is going, they are having to redeploy to the areas to again, keep and maintain control, particularly in that northeast corner, that Donbass area by Luhansk and Donetsk.
So, I mean, they may well be quite effective fighting forces on the ground, but they're not under a central command or control, and therefore it's a patchy.
Well, they are, Mark, but whether they listen to them or not is a different matter. I mean, certainly from Ukraine's side, their key is to take those ports, and to take those ports and then to control the Sea of Azov is going to be really critical, and that's where I think their focus is going to be, because that cuts off again resupply to Russians.
Final question on the cloak and dagger stuff. Reports coming in of yet another Putin critic falling out of a hotel window. This is Pavel Antov, a third-floor window in India. I mean, it said he had been depressed, but there does seem to be a bit of a pattern to this.
Well, I mean, there have been 23 alleged assassinations this year of high-ranking Russian businessmen, particularly within the oil, gas and energy sectors. But as they say in the clandestine world of assassinations, there are 3 ways that potentially assassinations will be carried out. It's either by gravity, by fire, or by water. And you look at the endings of many of these individuals, and they will fit into those categories.
Right, gravity seeming to be the most favourite at the moment with the hotel balconies. Right.
Yeah.
Will, as ever, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And, of course, we'll see what emerges in the possibility of those talks in February. Now, let's actually reflect that another 90 people reportedly crossed the Channel on Christmas Day. We haven't got the figures yet for Boxing Day. So the total so far this year, 45,756. A 60% increase, of course, on 2021. Well, the government trying to tackle the issue, but former Prime Minister Theresa May now warning that tightening the modern slavery protections to deter asylum claims could make it easier, not harder, for the criminal gangs to hold on to victims. Is the government tackling the migrant crisis in the right way? Joining us to discuss the issue now, former patrol boat commander Tom Sharp. Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Clearly, they've tried a bit of everything here, and yet the numbers keep on ticking up, as we've said, and suggestions we could even see more in these coming days.
You're right. The numbers are climbing up, and I'm seeing figures as high as 50,000 by the end of the year.
Wow.
The only mistake I think you can make when looking at this issue is to look at it down the lens of sort of one or two things, whether that's deterrence or stopping or detecting or using the Navy in the Channel. You really have to look at it holistically across all the sort of pillars, if you like. That starts with processes for people who are perfectly entitled to claim asylum. I think we need to step back one and look at how that's being managed or not. And that needs to be dealt with before we even get to those who would wish to cross the Channel illegally.
Well, the safe passage issue before obviously addressing perhaps the criminal gangs and the Albanians that have been identified, of course, using the boats to get across for what would be termed economic migration rather than trying to claim asylum.
That's right, and I think it's the part of the jigsaw that's often overlooked in the drama of the Channel crossings and the Border Force and the RNLI and the Royal Navy's assistance there. The actual process is to get people across legally so that they don't have to seek illegal routes is often overlooked, but it certainly forms part of this entire package.
But the other issue is something you've got direct interest in and experience, of course, and that is literally physically stopping the boats. And they've tried various things, of course, even trying to puncture the boats on the beaches, and that's not worked. Is it that it is now so entrenched and so sophisticated and organised that we've just got to try and abandon that approach?
We have to tackle the economic situation inland in France. That requires interagency cooperation and breaking the financial model that these criminal gangs are profiting from. It's the same as it was with piracy off the Horn of Africa. The solution to that was never at sea. It was always inland and disrupting the financial model. And that's exactly what we need here. That takes very high-level agency cooperation between us and the French. And if there is a positive to be gained out of the progress in all of this at the moment, it does sound like those conversations at the very highest level are starting to mature and starting to take shape.
Yeah, because we were told that, that some of that structure was already in place, but maybe it hadn't been enacted on the ground. You think that is improving now?
That's what I'm hearing. And this is a subject that is prone to sort of grand political hand gestures.
Yeah.
We saw the previous administration throwing the whole problem at the Royal Navy, which again, I mean, they could have done quite a lot with this if properly resourced and if it had been properly thought through, but it wasn't. It was a snap judgment. So there are always those who will leap to grand political gestures. But what I'm hearing from inside the tent is that these conversations, particularly with the French at the agency level, that could disrupt the economic model of smugglers are starting to mature.
OK, and therefore we're talking about what supply lines of the boats themselves, which are being brought from Eastern Europe, and of course the launching sites along what is actually quite a long stretch of coastline.
Well, right. So the economic model gets broken even further inland than that. By the time you get to the French beach, you're now into sort of police and constabulary cooperation to break up those assets there. And that needs to be done more aggressively. But I mean, an awful lot of migrants are stopping in France and Germany each year in percentage terms. So I can see why this hasn't been tackled as aggressively by the French in the past as we might hope for. But like I say, I think that is improving. I mean, you could say it should have improved 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think it is getting better now.
I mean, the other aspect is, looking at the time of year, could there actually be a breathing space, given with the weather worsening, that we could see the numbers falling off, even though, as we saw before Christmas, of course, attempts made even in those sub-zero temperatures?
Yes, it's not the temperature that's the deterrent, unfortunately, as we saw on the 15th when those people sadly died. It's actually high wind speeds. That's what's going to stop it. So unless we can predict them to any degree of accuracy, the predicted downturn is going to be difficult to call. So we need to deter them in other ways and then stop them getting in the water. But there is also a lot of money being spent on surveillance methods to detect them when crossing the channel. Which, in my view, a lot of which is being wasted. It's being misspent on drones, etc. When actually there are other surveillance measures in place that would stop anyone crossing undetected, and then they can be met at this end and processed.
Because we remember on the 15th, they were actually picked up, of course, by a fishing vessel, which managed to save many of them. And on that, I mean, what does all this do in a human cost to those of the RNLI and your patrol boats and RN members and so on, who've literally got to try and pluck people from the water or get families across to safety?
Yeah, it's pretty unpleasant. And certainly the migrant crossings in the Mediterranean, I was involved in that. And picking those poor souls out of the water is a very unpleasant business. The problem at the moment is the maritime assets are playing whack-a-mole, and they're constantly, because the aim is to meet all of these crossings on the water, and that's simply just achievable. There are too many of them. So back to surveillance. Surveil a stretch of water, and it's not that big in naval terms. Surveil it properly. Go to the assistance of those that are genuinely in distress, not those that are calling you in order to embark your large, safe vessel, but those that are genuinely in distress. And then make sure that all the others are met on the coast in this country. But I understand that politically at the moment, that is unacceptable.
Yeah, and causes all sorts of other particular issues associated with that. Tom Sharp, very interesting to speak to you. Thanks very much for joining us here on GB News once more. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Now, coming up, a right royal high point, well, reflecting on the celebrations of Our late Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And, of course, remember that cake and the cutting of that. Happier times, of course. Let's take a look at the weather for you now. Well, we've got windy conditions for many, cloud and outbreaks of rain moving east, so a wet evening for southwest England. Rain and drizzle, gusty winds too, but mild for the time of year. Temperatures of around 11 Celsius is the high. Then showery outbreaks of rain continuing this evening across much of the southeast of England with some brisk southwesterly winds. Temperatures around 9 Celsius. Then the rain clearing east across Wales this evening, although taking its time to clear for the south and east of Wales. Staying windy too, and a cloudy end of the day then as we head up to the Midlands with further spells of rain there. Could be heavy at times, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. Breezy too, temperatures around 9 Celsius once more there. Then outbreaks of rain continuing to move east this evening across northern England, with the rain heavy at times, but should be drier then from the west as the evening goes on. Temperatures, yes, around 9 degrees once more. Scattered showers following today's rain and snow then across Scotland, although we've still got that yellow weather warning in place. The showers falling as snow, therefore, on the higher ground with icy stretches with temperatures close to freezing. Largely dry end of the day for Northern Ireland. Plenty of clear spells. Just a few showers possible. Staying blustery, though, particularly across the coast and the hills. Heading overnight, mostly dry in the north, but icy stretches once more for Scotland and rain returning in the south.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, are communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Let's update you on this travel situation with, of course, the strike, the RMT strike, having come to an end at 6 this morning. But we're still getting reports of widespread disruption. We were showing you the pictures from King's Cross showing the difficulties people had trying to get back to where they wanted to be, despite Network Rail only asking people with essential journeys to travel, as if there was any other kind of journey to make, of course. We're being told particular problems for King's Cross and Paddington as well, where engineering works ran over. Our very own Simon Calder, the Independent's travel editor, of course, who updates us, saying there was chaos at Paddington. No trains having arrived or departed by 10 a.m, despite that industrial action ending at 6. Network Rail acknowledging there was disruption there because of the late handover of engineering works, and passengers still being told to prepare for significant disruption because of the various problems. Indications that Great Western Railway will be affected particularly, and also the cross-country services, because the TSSA, another union, having a walkout by its white-collar staff, affecting services from Penzance to the Midlands, Wales, Northern England, through the Scottish cities, as far north as Aberdeen. Oh dear. Anyway, let's talk about other tragic lows for the Windsor family, the royal family. Indeed, this morning we've been looking back at a royal year. But instead of dwelling on the passing of the late Queen, we've also been remembering the highs of the Platinum Jubilee. Now, remember back in June, the nation came together to celebrate the 70-year reign of Britain's longest-serving monarch at the time, Queen Elizabeth II. She appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace in front of those cheering crowds with the royal family, a British tradition on the global stage, as our royal reporter Cameron Walker reflects now on the Platinum Jubilee weekend.
A jubilant weekend of pomp and pageantry. The eyes of the world were on Great Britain as we celebrated Queen Elizabeth II's 70 years of service. Trooping the colour marked the official birthday of the late Queen. Over 1,400 soldiers, 200 horses and 400 musicians came together for a magnificent display of military precision, horsemanship and fanfare. The streets were packed with crowds.
For us all to be together, for us all to be celebrating, not just the Queen, but life, our lives, our being together again, was, I think, something very, very special.
The Queen appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony twice that day. Firstly with her cousin, the Duke of Kent, to watch the parade. Secondly, to watch the RAF fly past with working members of the royal family and their children. Mobility problems meant Her late Majesty chose not to take the salute at Horse Guards. Her son Charles took it on her behalf. That didn't stop the crowds erupting in applause when the Queen waved at them from the balcony. Only the roar of aircraft drowned them out, much to Prince Louis's horror. Queen Elizabeth helped light the principal Jubilee beacon. heralding the start of celebrations throughout her beloved Commonwealth. With the touch of her hand, an illuminated globe sent a river of light from Windsor Castle to Buckingham Palace, where Prince William watched the Tree of Trees sculpture bathe in light. The Queen was absent from her service of Thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex made their only official appearance of the weekend. There were cheers from the crowd when Harry and Meghan arrived, accompanied by a smattering of boos. The Queen also missed the derby at Epsom Downs, instead opting to view it on TV from Windsor Castle, where she was sent a souvenir race card to follow the action. It was understood the decision was taken for her comfort.
There was no guarantee we actually would have seen her. I know on the build-up to it, it was very much on the day to see how she was feeling. It will be memories, I'm sure, which will last all of our lifetimes. We've never seen anything like that. And I'm sure actually we'll never see anything like that again.
Street parties and Jubilee lunches were the talk of many towns across the UK. But perhaps the most memorable was the Platinum Party at the Palace. A star-studded event in front of spectators chosen in a lottery were treated to a surprise appearance from Her late Majesty alongside Paddington Bear. "Thank you, ma'am, for everything," Paddington said at the end of the sketch. Despite a little tantrum from a young prince, the crowds cheered for the pageant celebrating different decades of Her late Majesty's reign. The weekend was rounded off by one final appearance on the balcony from Queen Elizabeth II with her close family. 4 generations and 3 future kings. In a message of thanks, the Queen said she remained committed to serving the nation, a promise she kept for the rest of her life. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Remembering our late Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, and that was only June, remember. Now, you've been sending in your views on the issues of the day, Janine, and this is what we were discussing about the housing initiative from Michael Gove. We do not need more housing everywhere in the UK. In the northeast, huge concrete housing estates being built all over. We do not need any more built up here, destroying our beautiful green land. Betty saying, I do not believe that Putin is ready for peace talks. Zelensky asked for Christmas, but all Putin did was to blast them. Now I understand that Russians celebrate in the new year. I think, yes, January the 7th is the Orthodox Christmas. So Putin is asking for peace talks so that Russia can enjoy their time. Then he'll start blasting them again. Will then writing to say, what will happen when there are thousands of electric car batteries that need to be replaced? When car lithium-ion batteries catch fire, there's no way to put the fire out. Scary. Good issue, actually, because clearly they've got a lot of heavy metals in as well when they're being disposed. So that might be another problem on the way as all these electric cars reach the end of their particular life in the years to come. Keep all those views coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Also coming up, the latest figures showing that Just Stop Oil activists were arrested up to 7 times each during that time of chaos. Was it an efficient use of police time? Discussing that in a moment. First, let's get an update on the news headlines.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News.
Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Now, welcome back. You may remember their motto was "Just Stop Oil." Nothing going to stand in their way. Certainly, it seems not the Metropolitan Police at the time. Activists being arrested up to 7 times each, now we're being told, during that month of roadblock chaos across London. The latest figures showing, out of these 755 people arrested between October the 1st and November the 4th, 155 detained by police more than once. Just over 1 in 5, indeed. Their actions including blockading the M25 and roads across the capital, leading to some frustrated motorists actually dragging them out of the way physically. Well, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, called on the police to introduce stronger action as a result. But have all those arrests been a waste of police time? Could have things been done any better? Joining us now, former Scotland Yard detective and television host, of course, Peter Bleksley. Peter, thanks for joining us, and a happy new year to you as we head towards 2023. And I guess that there will be those police officers looking at, possible disruption in the new year, thinking, can we actually change the way that we handle this?
Yes, Just Stop Oil have vowed to be back with their extremely disruptive protests, and I'm sure they will be. The police were very slow in the early stages of these protests. And I think basically there was a fundamental lack of courage on behalf of the police and prosecutors to use the existing law robustly and to challenge some of the stated cases, particularly a stated case which said it would only be an offence to obstruct the highway if the disruption was significant. Well, that came from a dated case from some years ago. And of course, when Just Stop Oil were carrying out these protests day after day after day, that should have been the time when the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police and the CPS said, this is our definition of significant. We will take these people to court, we will challenge that previous ruling, and we will see these people punished.
But clearly there is a sensitivity about the right to peaceful protest and where that line is drawn. And obviously the officers on the ground have to have direction from above on that.
Absolutely right. I completely agree. The right to protest is, of course, a cornerstone of our flagship democracy. And the police know that only too well because they facilitate protest and marches and demonstrations on an almost weekly basis. In fact, it's not so many years ago when thousands of police officers marched their way to Parliament themselves. So officers understand that. But there was a fundamental lack of really grasping the issue here in these protests. And of course, the damage to public trust in the police was huge, and damage to the economy is almost incalculable.
Yeah, and did actually it swing then too far the other way? I remember there was this issue, I think it was Hertfordshire Police. They arrested a reporter for the news, LBC News, on an issue of conspiracy. The fact that the reporter had arrived at the scene before the protest happened. They actually arrested her and I think put her in a cell for a few hours. That clearly they were a bit sensitive and went the other way almost.
She was indeed, and there was a shocking lack of common sense applied in that case. I believe that the journalists showed their accreditation, but the police officers were clearly so almost brainwashed by their superiors and the instructions that were handed down that they forgot that policing is often about discretion and common sense. And sadly, both of those appeared to be severely lacking in that occasion.
A lot of people were contacting us at the time, I remember emailing us and saying, whatever happened to obstruction? We thought that was quite a sort of straightforward process, that if a police officer thought that you were obstructing the highway, off you went.
Under the Highways Act of 1980. Absolutely a piece of legislation which is very much in force today. But again, the police got themselves tied up about this previous stated case that said demonstrators should only be arrested if the obstruction was significant or the disruption caused was significant. And therefore, the police got themselves in a huge tangle. There was massive public frustration. We saw members of the public taking matters into their own hands, dragging people from the street. On one occasion, a woman nudged her vehicle into the back of a protester, a potentially very dangerous thing to do. And police, the confidence and trust that the public have in the police, which is already at an all-time low, simply tanked over this. The public would like to see their streets cleared, and there's enough legislation to do that, so that they can go about their daily business, whether that be going to work, visiting hospital, relatives going shopping, or otherwise keeping the wheels of the economy and the nation turning.
Yeah, and of course, the police going about their normal business as well. I mean, you've been with us here in the studio discussing issues of burglary and other things and the rates at which the police aren't able to solve crimes because they're busy doing other things. It's the manpower that's diverted to deal with these issues as well.
Very much so. And of course, there were some catastrophic figures published this year that showed just how few people are being charged, being convicted for crimes that really matter to people, like burglary and theft of our cars and other types of assault. And this just adds to what really was a pretty bad year for the police overall. And they do need to recover from this. They need to actually get back, I would argue, to the fundamentals of policing, which were laid down by Sir Robert Peel nearly 200 years ago when he formed the Metropolitan Police. And for anybody that wants to go online and just search Peel's principles of policing, you will find that they are as relevant, as apt, and as apposite today as they were 200 years ago.
Yeah, the peelers, as they were called. I mean, just on that thought, finally, Peter, there is a new boss at the Met. How do you think he's shaped up so far?
Well, he had a couple of stumbles early on, and I, as much as anybody, would like him to succeed. Because policing our capital city is a very big job. It's a very important job. And I want him to set an example from which other chief constables around the land can follow. I wish him well, but, you know, it's not been it's not an easy job, and it's not been a truly brilliant start.
OK, so we'll assess how he's doing in the new year and no doubt have you back in the studio to mark him out of 10. Peter, for the moment, thanks for joining us once more and we wish you a happy new year, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, you've been sending in yet more views, getting plenty off your chest with us this morning, this afternoon as well. Elizabeth, first of all, it's immoral as well as stupid to take more than half of what a taxpayer earns. This is the reflection, of course, that the stealth taxes, as they call the tax bans, mean that you're going to be paying up to £40,000 in the next 10 years, we're told, in extra tax. Peter, meanwhile, I've worked all over Europe and the lowest standard of new builds are those built in the UK. No other country would allow such substandard building that's allowed here in the UK. Youngsters getting 35-year mortgages for houses that will not last that long. Interesting point. Elizabeth, meanwhile, has been in touch to say the only way the Rwanda project was going to be as effective deterrent was if it had been applied straight away. Once the idea got abroad, it would be thwarted. It was no longer a deterrent. Interesting point, of course, although the High Court has ruled that it is still a legal policy for the government. Now, the UK government is to stop publishing the COVID-19 modelling data altogether because it's, quote, no longer necessary. Publicly available measures such as the R number will be completely discarded from the end of next month, we're told. Regular updates on coronavirus measures become a regular feature or fixture during the height of the pandemic, but increasingly sporadic in recent months. And the Modelling Review Group said that following a detailed review, the next publication on COVID-19, January the 6th, will be the last. So officials saying the vaccine rollout and the success of new treatments, meaning it was no longer necessary to collate the figures. So joining us now to discuss this, British medical expert and consultant oncologist, Professor Carol Sikora. Carol, thank you for joining us on this. Does it actually mean actually reinterpreting that? Have we won the battle?
I think that's probably the most generous interpretation you can give it. The R number stood for reproduction number, and it's very simple. Even my grandchildren now know what the R number is, that if you have an infectious case, then if it infects one person, the R is 1. If it infects 5 people, the R becomes 5. And it changes with time during a pandemic. So it was useful. It's no longer useful because it's the end of the pandemic. And, getting into lockdown, into wearing masks, all that sort of stuff we went through is very easy. You just announce it, you make the legislation. Getting out of it is much more difficult because you've got a backlog of fear. And that's what we're fighting now.
Do you think, though, that we are out of that stage? I mean, a lot of people still say, well, be aware there could still be variants out there. We see what's happening in China, of course, where they've not had this vaccination programme. And from all accounts, we can't get, of course, independently verified figures. Tens of thousands are dying.
I think that is a big problem, that it's an international disease, of course, because there are no borders in reality, despite what we try and maintain. And the time scale for it going differs in different countries. But because travel is completely open now, people come from China to London every day, plane loads off them. Whatever's happening in one part of the world is happening the next day in the next part of the world. And that is a big problem, international travel. The WHO have done what they can, but they're not very enforcing of their beliefs and their rules. And maybe we need a better international body to say what should really happen.
I'm still seeing a lot of people, though, when I travel on the trains and so on, wearing face masks. It does seem that it's changed human behaviour, and clearly with Strep A at the moment, of course, lots of mums and dads are being a lot more aware, should we say, of these issues and getting medical help as soon as they can.
You're right that it's not just coronavirus, it's highlights the whole problem of infectious disease, which obviously is much worse in winter than in the summer. It's totally seasonal. And there's all sorts of viruses out there, influenza being one, Strep A is a bacteria, but it's another winter infection. And the problem we've got is that what coronavirus has done is raise the fear about infections generally. And of course, infections do kill. They tend to kill elderly people, people over 80 that die of pneumonia in care homes. And this has been going on for years, every winter. And it's a cause of what we call winter pressures in the NHS. People have to go into hospital, get intravenous antibiotics, and then go home.
But we're obviously a lot more aware of it. Final thought, and I know this is, going into the political sphere, but clearly still a lot of unease about what's happening to the NHS. We're now being told that junior doctors may well be balloted for industrial action, and figures suggesting a lot of them just want to leave the profession.
It is very worrying. I've been a consultant for 42 years at the NHS, and there's no doubt I've never seen a situation more frightening than what looks ahead. Medical schools have been capped on the number of students they can take to go to become doctors. A lot of the young doctors are disenfranchised with the whole system and want to leave the country, often to Australia and New Zealand, who are very hungry for doctors. So plenty of jobs in the world for doctors, and we've got to do something. And, with Whether a Conservative government can do it, whether a Labour government could do it better, I don't know. It's not really a political issue. We've got to do something about the NHS. It's a disaster area at the moment.
Yeah, some systemic reform, as people have said, needs to be looked at. So, well, let's wish you a healthy and a happy new year anyway. Professor Carol Sikora, thanks for joining us. Thank you. So let's suggest that every festive period, hundreds of dogs, of course, rescued from being abandoned or taken into animal shelters. And this year, particularly, of course, with the cost of living crisis, well, it might be even worse. So dog homes across the country warning of an increase now in abandoned pets. So we sent our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson to Birmingham Dogs Home to find out how they're getting on and give man's best friend a second chance.
A dog is for life, not just for Christmas. The phrase coined by the charity Dogs Trust remains as true as ever, 40 years later. Every Christmas, the RSPCA estimate 4,000 animals are dumped in England and Wales. When they're found, many are brought to charities like Birmingham Dogs Home and their Sunnyside Centre in Wolverhampton. Centre manager Karen Doy says the number of dogs brought here is up on last year.
The dog wardens are bringing the dogs in daily. This particular centre has 5 local authorities, and I think there's 9 altogether between the 2 sites, as and Birmingham at Solihull. So we do get a lot of dogs in. We're up this year, there's 250 dogs have come in to date, more this year than last year. So we are extremely pushed for space. We're getting inquiries daily about people asking if we can help take their dogs in. They can't afford them any longer.
The charity has existed in the Midlands for more than 130 years. But in the middle of a cost of living crisis, keeping a place like this open has been made more difficult over the past year, as head of fundraising Fee Harrison explains.
So we have 4 kennels, which means that we have more mouths to feed, more vet bills, more kennels to keep warm. So our fundraising appeal for Christmas is more important than ever. We have lots of support from local businesses, which is great. So people are bringing down donations of food and biscuits and toys, which is fabulous. We've also got an appeal on our website where people can go on there and they can donate online. They can donate in memory of people and in memory of their dogs. So we're trying to be creative and do as many things as we can just to keep that support coming in.
It's not just donations that this centre needs. For dogs, this place is full, and so they need people to come and adopt dogs, like Timothy. And dogs to adopt come in all shapes and sizes. This is Donald. He's a 9-month-old American Bulldog cross and arrived at the centre in October. But unfortunately, upon his arrival, he had to have surgery.
He came into us in October. He had unfortunately got a damaged left hind leg, so we sent him for x-rays straight away. Unfortunately, it did turn out that he did have an untreated injury to his leg. He had both damaged his stifle, his pelvis and his femur. So we sent him to have an amputation because that was the only thing we could do to make him comfortable. He is definitely not dampened his spirits, and he's a really happy little chap, loving life still, so that's nice.
Without Birmingham Dogs Home, Donald would not be the bouncy 9-month-year-old pup he is today. This Christmas and New Year, when the calls come in from people who can no longer look after their canine companion, charities like this across the country will be there to love and look after them until they can hopefully find their forever home. Jack Carson, GB News.
And some of his friends. And we wish them all well, of course. Hopefully they all find loving homes. Now, Prince Andrew made something of a surprise appearance with the royal family on the annual Christmas walkabout at Sandringham, heading to church. But one experts insisted he'll never be the working royal he once was. This comes just a few days after it was reported the Duke had been kicked out, I think was the phrase the Daily Mail used, of the family, no longer allowed to use Buckingham Palace as an office by the King. Well, the waiting crowds, though, not expecting the Duke's appearance at Sandringham. The footage released also showing him interacting with a freezing royal fan and giving the novel advice on how to stay warm by telling them how to avoid cold feet by insulating them with newspaper. Someone else familiar with newspaper, Charles Ray, former royal correspondent at The Sun. And Charles, actually, he's not far wrong, is he? Because, I mean, many hacks will remember the trick of using a bit of cardboard or newspaper to stand on when they're waiting outside various buildings.
Right. Absolutely, he's spot on. It's a pity he wasn't spot on with his other
solutions, to be perfectly honest. But no, he actually told one well-wisher, who apparently looked completely bewildered, that she should stand on a newspaper to keep her little toesies warm. Quite remarkable.
Yeah, maybe he was looking at the Daily Mail as well, given what they've been reporting on him in recent times. However, it's quite significant that he actually made the appearance and was prepared to interact with the public as well.
Yeah, big surprise. I mean, he was at the back, slightly away. You know, in newspapers we tend to try and gauge how far away he is from the actual main crowd. So he wasn't too close to them. But I was surprised to see him there, to be perfectly honest. And yeah, he shook hands with members of the public, and they spoke to him, and then he scurried back up to. I use the word scurry, and I don't mean that in a nasty way. Back up to the house. So yeah, it was a surprise. But let's not run away with this. This is a big sign that he's on his way back, Mark, because he isn't. He's never coming back. Never in a professional royal role, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and I think probably the confirmation of that, this story about the office being removed from Buckingham Palace, where clearly he is no longer part of that royal household.
Yeah, it was a Sun exclusive that they were taking away the office. I mean, I was surprised to find out he still had an office and still had a staff there, because God knows what they were doing, Mark. They weren't doing very much. They may have been opening a few letters, but I mean, I think the letters were getting less and less and less and less. Yeah. And it's no surprise. I mean, it wasn't a great week for him, really. He lost we knew he lost his patronage, and that was given to Camilla, the Queen. And we also know he's lost his gun security, police security, and he's now got private security, which he's paying for, which they've got tasers. But I can't see anybody wanting to make a go at him at all for anything. He's really left with just riding in Windsor Great Park, sitting on his sofa at home and watching TV. It's a pity he can't think of something he could do to sort of make amends, atone, or work with some charity. But to be perfectly honest, which charity would want him? It really is a big problem.
There is a difficulty, however, for the royal family, in that his two daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, they're very much still involved in the centre of things, aren't they?
Very much. I mean, both Eugenie and Beatrice had made a plea to their uncle, the king, to try to give their father something, to do, and that's fallen on deaf ears. There is no way that the king can bring Andrew back into the fold. He has consistently denied any of the allegations that were made against him by this lady, Virginia Giuffre. But you've still got to answer the main question, Andrew. Why do you give up to £12 million to a woman you claim you have no recollection of meeting? That is going to haunt him for the rest of his life.
Yeah. So therefore, the big question looking ahead to next year, Charles, what will he be doing, if anything, at the coronation, do you think?
I would be surprised if he has any role. He may get a seat among the congregation. Well, he should get a seat in the congregation. It's his brother who's going to be king. But a role? No, I can't see him getting any role at all.
Charles, thank you very much for joining us, and a special thank you for wearing your Christmas pudding shirt as well. We're very impressed. The best so far, even out doing Tom's jumpers. So many thanks for that. And we wish you a Happy New Year, of course. Coming up next, Patrick will be back with you, having done breakfast as well. He's eager for plenty of action today. We're back midday tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of the day, of course. Time to get a check, though, on the weather for you now. Well, we've got windy conditions for many, cloud and outbreaks of rain moving east, so a wet evening for southwest England. Rain and drizzle, gusty winds too, but mild for the time of year. Temperatures of around 11 Celsius is the high. Then showery outbreaks of rain continuing this evening across much of the southeast of England with some brisk southwesterly winds. Temperatures around 9 Celsius. Then the rain clearing east across Wales this evening, although taking its time to clear for the south and east of Wales. Staying windy too, and a cloudy end of the day then as we head up to the Midlands with further spells of rain there. Could be heavy at times, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. Breezy too, temperatures around 9 Celsius once more there. Then outbreaks of rain continuing to move east this evening across northern England, with the rain heavy at times, but should be drier then from the west as the evening goes on. Temperatures, yes, around 9 degrees once more. Scattered showers following today's rain and snow then across Scotland, although we've still got that yellow weather warning in place. The showers falling as snow, therefore, on the higher ground with icy stretches with temperatures close to freezing. Largely dry end of the day for Northern Ireland, plenty of clear spells, just a few showers possible. Staying blustery though, particularly across the coasts and the hills. Heading overnight, mostly dry in the north, but icy stretches once more for Scotland and rain returning in the south.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.